There you go. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I'd like to welcome everybody. It's great to see a large crowd and particularly young people. One day, hopefully, you'll be running for city council and running for mayor, and you'll be sitting up here. And it's nice to have you here today to join us. So this is the City of St. Helena regular city council meeting, Tuesday, January 28th, 2020. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which I have asked our Vice Mayor, Mr. Doring, to begin with.
Place your hand over your heart and pledge along with me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we'll have the roll call, please.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Here.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Present.
Koberstein.
Here.
Councilmember Chouteau is absent.
Okay, and now we'll move to the public forum. The public forum is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on matters of municipal concern that are not on today's agenda. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes, please. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarification may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas. But in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Is there any public comment on this, at this point, on any item that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will move now to reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. And I will begin with Ms. Ueda, our city attorney.
I don't have a report this evening.
And our city manager.
Briefly, a couple of council members, and I think one of them will probably note this in their report, attended League of California City Policy Committees in Sacramento late last week. I attended the Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee, and Councilmember Chouteau attended the Environmental Quality Policy Committee and also the Mayors and Council Members Conference.
Thank you. I will move to our city clerk.
Nothing to report.
Our planning department.
Just a quick update that Ms. Nixon and I met with our town St. Helena representatives yesterday, just to get a general overview of the work that they're doing in the city and get acclimated to work together collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anything from our public works? Here you are, here.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide an update that the Cornell Pump Station upgrade project went to Planning Commission and passed, so we'll be finalizing design and bringing that back hopefully next couple of months so we can get out to advertise and bid.
Very good. Mr. Knudsen? Mr. Doring?
No report.
Ms. Koberstein? No. Okay, very quickly, yes, as Mr. Presswich, our city manager, mentioned, I was over as well at a League of California Cities Policy Committee meeting. I'm on the Government Transparency Committee. One of the things we're trying to do is really engage with the League of California Cities. This brings us access to best practice throughout the state. Sacramento is just over the hill, so this is a great opportunity for our town and our community to engage in learning about best practice moving forward. So that was last week, and then I also want to continue to remind folks about Club 25. This is a club you can be in by driving the speed limit or the safe speed under the speed limit and coming to complete stops at stop signs, and this makes it safer for our pedestrians and cyclists in town. So I just want to say to folks to join Club 25 and drive the speed limit. So with that, we will move now to presentations and public recommendations, and I'm going to begin. We have a very special commendation tonight, and this is for Harper McClain, and I'm going to come up to the podium, and if Harper would join me up here, that would be wonderful.
Wow, getting bigger every day.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read a little something, and I'm going to hand this to you and then ask you to say a few comments.
Okay.
So this is a City of St. Helena proclamation recognizing Harper McClain's accomplishments. Whereas every endeavor and challenge or tryout Harper has chosen to take on has been 100% her idea, driven only by her desire to challenge herself. Her parents, family, and coaches have always been there to support her, but it has always been all her. And when faced with adversity, she meets it head on. Whereas soccer was her first passion, in 7th grade, after playing on the bronze team, she tried out for the gold team the following year, but didn't make the cut. At first, she was upset, but then followed up with her coach about what she needed to work on. She took it to heart and began training on her own during cold, dark, and sometimes rainy mornings before school in the light of the Safeway parking lot. During practice, she was always the last one off the pitch, leaving only when she had executed the day's skill. The following year, she tried out again, made the gold team, and began a 3-year journey of soccer where she played for Santa Rosa's Unified ECNL travel team, the St. Helena High School girls soccer team, and was invited to play for Northern California's Olympic Development Program. Whereas, inspired by her younger brother Cleo's newly found passion for running and placing first in his age group in the Napa Valley Marathon, Harper decided to join St. Helena's high school track team in the spring of 2019. With personal determination and the coaching of Chris Cole and Bob Cantrell, she broke several school records, qualified, and placed in the top 10 at the state meet in the 3200. With their guidance, she built on that success, qualified, and took first place in the 3,000 meters and 1,500 meters at the Summer Junior Olympics in Sacramento. She thrived at running on a track built for the U.S. Olympic trials and participating in opening ceremonies with hundreds of athletes from around the country. Whereas in the fall of 2019, after a strong showing during the cross-country season, she qualified for and won the Division V California State Cross Country Championship meet. Whereas with the goal of attending college as a student athlete, Harper applies the same work ethic to her academics. Though school can be challenging for her, Harper takes college prep and AP courses while maintaining a high GPA. Now therefore let it be resolved that I, Jeff Ellsworth, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, along with the City Council, do hereby recognize Harper McClain for her outstanding accomplishments.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Council, for honoring my achievements this cross-country season. I am very excited to receive this honor and be able to represent this sport for this town and both on the state and national level. When going to the state meet, I was going up to my hotel room and and fellow competitors passed me in the halls and asked if I was Harper McClain from St. Helena, and I was proud to say yes. Recently, I received a text message from a fellow competitor from the state meet in which she said, "Hi Harper, I'm just another runner from Division V who is super impressed with your season. Congratulations on winning D5 at the state meet and crushing it at nationals. You are carrying out the dreams of so many of us, but I can only imagine all the hard work you've put in. Keep being awesome and know that you are influencing more people than you know just by being gritty." This text message from a high school runner who I had never met was very amazing to receive. Along with this, I was in communication with someone who I am inspired by, Jordan Hesse, an Olympic marathon runner from Oregon University and an Oregon Project professional runner. She spoke with me via text before the national meet in Oregon, wishing me the best of luck. With some of these messages mentioned, this season I was introduced to the fact that the competitive running community is much like a family. I would not be here this evening without the support of my friends and family. This goes back all the way to the point when I was dedicated to soccer. I am thankful for my dad, my mom, Chris, my grandparents, and my sister helping me get to all the practices, even when it was pouring rain or late at night. Thank you for continually assisting me in all my endeavors, no matter how daunting they seemed. seem. The support in which I have has continued to help me reach my goals. I would like to thank my mom for all the hard work she put into helping me get registered for all the big meets and helping support me and get in the mindset to running, along with my dad. Likewise with Mr. Cinto being a huge help in this process. I also would like to thank my coaches Chris Cole and Bob Control for helping me become a better runner and athlete. Kobe Bryant, an inspiration to many and a legendary basketball player which had a work ethic that I aspire to reach. Here are his words in which resonate with me. Those times when you get up early and those times when you get up early and you work hard, those times when you stay up late and you work hard, those times when you don't feel like working, you're too tired, you don't want to push yourself, but you do it anyway. That is actually the dream. That's the dream. It's not the destination, it's the journey. And if you guys can understand that, then what you'll see happen is you won't accomplish your dreams. Your dreams won't come true. Something greater will.
We're all very, very proud of you. Thank you. Oh, and we have a photo of Harper in action, and apparently it was a pretty challenging course with the rain. Is that correct, Mr. Prestwich? Okay.
Jeff, will you turn that?
Yes. Okay, we'll now move to our item 6.2. This is Officer Todd Heald to receive commendation from Chief of Police Chris Hartley.
Come on up here, Todd. You're fine. Officer Heald, on January 6, 2020, at approximately 9:45 hours, you were on duty and were dispatched to Behringer Winery for the report of a burglary which had occurred the night before. You responded to the scene by yourself, interviewed employees, searched the building, located and processed evidence, discovered video footage, and unlocked exterior doors that were unknown to the business. Within hours, you were able to identify a possible suspect. You contacted the Vallejo Police Department and informed them of the stolen vehicle from the winery and the address of the possible suspect. With the information you provided, the Vallejo Police Department was able to locate the vehicle, which at the time was being driven by your suspect. The Vallejo Police Department detained the suspect until your arrival. Your hard work and determination resulted in the recovery of stolen property, which included the stolen vehicle and the arrest of the suspect responsible for the burglary. I commend you for your hard work and diligence in this case. You brought great credit upon yourself and are in keeping with the high standards of the St. Helena Police Department and the City of St. Helena.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Hartley and Officer Heald. Thank you. And now we will move to our oath of office for Colton Adams.
A little bit more. That way everyone can see you. If you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations.
This is Mrs. Adams, Colton's mom. One proud mom tonight.
Dad's over here.
Thank you for being a part of our community here. Thank you. And now we are going to move to item 6.4, and this is oath of office for Randal Stephenson.
There you go. If you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Randal Stephenson,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will
that I will
bear true faith
bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
purpose of evasion,
and that I will
and that I will
well and faithfully
well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
which I'm about to enter.
which I'm about to enter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and council
Thank
members.
Thank you, and thank you for being a part of the community. And we are so thankful for the work that you do, and it's much appreciated. And it's nice to see the folks from the police here tonight. And just want to let you know that it is much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, we will move on now to our staff briefings. We will go to 7.1. This is the Upper York Creek Dam Project update by Erica Ahmann Smithies, our Public Works Director and City Engineer.
Thank you. Last we met, we had EKI up here for the amendment to their contract for additional work. Just wanted to give a quick rundown of where we are since 2 weeks ago. The Upper York Creek tree removal has begun. It started the week of January 13th. As you can see on the left, we couldn't get the entire redwood grove that's at the base of the dam in the one photo because they're so tall. And then you can see at the end of the week, we had progressed quite significantly. There's 9 trees in total that are being taken down so we can expedite work this summer on the dam removal. If you go to the next slide, this is this last week. I don't know if you can't see the little orange glimpse in the left picture, but if you zoom forward in the right picture, that gentleman in the photo, who's a local tree removal, Britain Tree Services, is at approximately 160 feet up in the air. It's some of the largest trees they've taken down. And if you go to this week, or the end of last week, next slide, they gotten everything chopped down except for that very last tip. They're working on that this week. It's very precarious because now you only have one tree to attach to, and so they're taking their time to get that last bit down. But it's pretty amazing that within 2 weeks' time, we've gotten this far, which will help expedite this project this summer. And I'm happy to announce that on Friday we submitted hopefully the final permit submittals to all the regulatory agencies, and we're hoping to get some feedback in the coming weeks. So that's the greatest movement on the Upper York Creek to date. So thank you.
Okay. And then now we'll move to 7.2. That's the update on the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project, and also by Ms. Smithies.
So 2 weeks ago, Council concurred with the draft concept plan and the financial plan to get the wastewater treatment plant upgrades move forward. We submitted those to the state. We also met with the adjacent property owner that has concerns about the placement of the plant. The consultant has since moved it over as much as we could. We sent those revised plans to the adjacent neighbors, haven't heard back from them, but we're trying to make as much possible as reduce any impacts to the neighbors as we can. Also keeping in mind the city's timeline to complete this project. Next steps are moving forward with the design bid and as well as getting the CEQA moving forward so we can get the USDA loans process started. They require the environmental in hand before we can get that loan locked in. So
Okay.
more in the future.
All right. So with that, we'll move now to the consent items. And I'll read through this list. If anybody's interested in pulling an item, you can let me know. I'll just go through the numbers. 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4. And so if nobody's seeing one to pull, I'll entertain a motion to pass the consent items.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilor Koberstein?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, with that, we will move now to our public hearings. This is item 9.1, and this is the applicant appeal of the Planning Commission denial of demolition permit and design review at 1443 Stockton Street, number PL 19.001. In this hearing, we'll hear a staff. Oh, yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I must recuse myself because I am within the. I'm too close to the property in question.
Okay, so we'll let you know when we're done with the item. So we'll move on to the hearing. Is the applicant here in the audience? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll have a staff report, and then we'll have the applicant come up for 15 minutes, and then we'll open for public comment. We'll offer the applicant 5 minutes for rebuttal, and then we'll bring it back to council decision or discussion and then a motion. So who is presenting the staff report this evening?
Okay, sure. So I'm going to provide some opening comments just about the standards for review, what the council is doing, and the relevant code sections, and then the actual project discussion I'll turn back over to planning staff. So tonight, Mayor and members of the city. Better? So tonight, this item is coming to you from an appeal from a decision of the Planning Commission. There are two applicable standards in the city's municipal code that govern this proceeding. One is the standards concerning the appeal, and that's set forth in section 17.08.180 of the code, which basically provides that the city council considers this appeal on a de novo review, or you're basically considering it anew. And the council's options for action tonight are to affirm the decision, to deny the decision, or to modify the Planning Commission's decision. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon is that as set forth in the Planning Commission staff report for this item, the item came to the Planning Commission, is now coming to the City Council for a demolition permit and design review consideration. So the applicable standards to use in evaluating the project are those that are set forth in the city's code concerning design review standards, and they're all set forth in detail in the staff report for the Planning Commission for you to consider. So depending on whatever action you end up taking, the resolution that is eventually going to be drafted for this item will be based on those design review considerations. So those are the two items I wanted to mention about the setting.
Okay. Is there additional
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application was deemed complete in January of 2019 and was first considered by the Planning Commission at its meeting of June 18th, 2019. In the staff report prepared for that hearing, staff recommended approval based on meeting all of the standards of the zoning code and the general plan. During the course of the public hearing, there were several people that raised concerns, so the Planning Commission ultimately continued the public hearing to allow the applicant time to prepare some visual images to show the relationship of the height between the new building and those on the block. At its meeting of November 5th, 2019, the Commission considered the exhibits and information submitted by the property owner, and after considering all the information from the property owner, receiving written and oral testimony from those in the audience desiring to be heard, and discussing the issues, the Planning Commission voted to deny the application and directed staff to return with a resolution for denial. In essence, the Planning Commission's denial was based on a determination that the proposed design is not compatible with the immediate environment of the site, and that the Planning Commission determined that the proponent failed to take adequate steps to comply with specific sections of the municipal code pertaining to design review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, the applicant is here, as we know.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And so now the applicant has the opportunity to come speak for up to 15 minutes up at the podium.
Is that on? Yeah. Hi, I'm Jenny Vitro, property owner of 1443 Stockton Street. I submitted a rather lengthy letter with our appeal application. I don't think I need to read it all here. But obviously, we do feel that the project complies with all of the governing code sections for the medium density residential zoning district. We are not requesting any variances. We've met all the setback requirements, and further, this home meets all the design review guidelines that are set forth in section 17164.0.3, and as stated in the planning department's original staff report, they found that there was no component of the project that would be incompatible with the immediate environment of the site or that of the greater neighborhood. I laid out in my letter how I believe we've, met all of those considerations for design review. It seems to be a rather subjective determination, if you will. According to section 17164040, there are limitations of review, and only the proponent's failure to take reasonable account of the criteria shall justify the commission's disapproving of a proposal solely on the basis of design, which is basically what we feel has happened. Further, 17164.040B states individual initiative and experimentation are to be encouraged. I think that shows that the purpose of design review is not to ensure that there's homogeneousness on any given block within a neighborhood, or that compatibility means uniformity, that my house needs to look exactly like the one next to it, that it has to be of a similar height. I think we've stayed within all the guidelines, and we really feel that the project should be approved as submitted. And my architect, Terry, is here for questions if that becomes appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's okay. I can fill it.
Oh, God.
So at this point, I will open it for public comment to anybody who has comment to the council.
Good evening. I'm Connie Wilson, Scott Street, and my family has resided on this block of Stockton Street since my birth, and my mother still lives in our family home. This block of Stockton Street is one of the remaining few where people have, with little appreciation for the history of our neighborhoods, have come in to build out lots for the maximum benefit of return. Of the 6 homes on the block that have been recently remodeled, all have adhered to the original designs of small bungalow-type homes. The Planning Commission correctly voted 4-1 to deny this application, which does not respect the character of this neighborhood. And barring any new compelling evidence, I also ask you respectively to please uphold this vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Additional public comment?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Katie Kater Lynn. My husband Doug and I own 1440 Stockton Street. And we really simply want to say you have this huge packet of information. This issue was very thoroughly discussed by the Planning Commission, and it voted 4-1 to deny the permit in question. And so far there is, as Connie Wilson said, no new and compelling evidence that would cause any of us to support this request for a permit. So we continue to oppose it. We would like to have the City Council uphold the decision made by their Planning Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there additional public comment?
Okay, I found this on the web first.
Sorry about that.
Please.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Kelperis. I've lived at 1615 Main Street for 50 years, but I own the homes at 1421 Stockton and 1612 Adams, which is a single parcel. They were built by my late in-laws in 1954 and 55 when they retired from the restaurant business. These houses were the first homes they had ever owned. The Stockton Street house was to be their forever home, with the Adams Street cottage as a rental. I attended both the June 18th and November 5th meetings of the Planning Commission. I strongly disagreed with the staff findings that the project was compatible with the immediate environment of this site, excuse me, and would retain the character of the existing residences. In preparation for the June 18th hearing, I walked the full length of Stockton, both sides, between Spring and Madrona, a street so narrow that parking is only allowed on one side of the street. In preparation for the November 5th meeting, in rereading the documents included in the packet for the hearing, I noted that the parcel map that was submitted, which is your PDF page 80, highlighted other two-story homes in the neighborhood. 1505 Stockton is parcel with a 16 circled, is approximately 103 feet wide and almost 1/3 of an acre. 37 circled is 1611 Madrona, which faces Madrona and has a garage access on Stockton. The applicant submitted images, PDF page 81, of other two-story homes, none of which are on the narrow portion of Stockton between Adams and Madrona. In my opinion, the impacted neighborhood is the narrow portion of Stockton between Adams and Madrona, in particular Adams to Pine. The parcel map depicted, again PDF page 80, conveniently ignores the homes fronting on the opposite side of Stockton Street. I created my own parcel map, PDF page 82, from the internet that includes the homes on the even-numbered sides of Stockton. There is no other two-story home on Stockton between Adams and Pine. I believe that building a two-story home on a 52-foot wide lot would not be compatible with this neighborhood and would be out of character for that portion of Stockton Street. If this project is approved, it will change the character of this narrow street and set a precedent for future demolitions and remodels. I don't want to see this neighborhood replicate the portion of Stockton between Spring and Taylor. Several years ago, during a hearing concerning a proposed two-story home next to a smaller one-story home, neither of which were on Stockton Street, the remark was made, I believe, by one of the then planning commissioners that we don't want to Stocktonize this street. This was in reference to the number of larger homes previously allowed next to small cottages and modest family homes on Stockton between Spring and Taylor. On November 5th, following the presentations, When the commissioners were discussing the project prior to voting, Commissioner Pont remarked, and I reviewed the video, this is about 44 minutes in a whole neighborhood of one-story small bungalows on both sides of the street, a two-story home at this location would stick out like a sore thumb. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Betty Beckstoffer. My husband and I own the 1445 Stockton Street, which is I'm next door to the opposition here, and I'm here for the same reason that everybody has expressed before me, and we hope that the council will consider this and protect our neighborhood. We all live there for what it is. It's a cottage neighborhood. We bought it with the idea of living there and downsizing when we get to that stage. And we're very concerned that this would happen in our neighborhood. So thank you for listening, and I hope you all will continue to uphold this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Additional public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll give the applicant 5 minutes for rebuttal if you choose.
I guess my main point of rebuttal would just be that I agree that this could set a precedent for the entire medium density residential neighborhood, that if you're going to limit the development rights of certain properties based on who their neighbors are, you're going to need to be pretty specific about how that works. I think that becomes a major issue for property owners, their rights, their disclosure obligations when selling property, etc. So I understand the neighbors are hesitant to see new development happen in this neighborhood. I think we have done a really nice job and are planning to build a really lovely home that would honestly enhance the neighborhood. So they seem to be strongly opposed to a two-story house. We were well under the allowable height, and I think we've been provided more information just today about how the very front facade is even lower than the 25 feet. So again, I hope you will consider our wishes and desires as property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the council for discussion.
Did you say we could ask questions?
Oh, yes, if
Is your architect here this evening? Could you come to the mic?
Terry Tracy, I'm the architect. I live at 1443 Alta Avenue in Napa.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions.
Okay.
The height of this house is 25 feet, the roof height. That is at the back portion of the house, is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the height at the front, the part that presents itself to the street?
Well, I have a little picture I can pass around to you guys. What's most noticeable from looking at it up from the street is not the peaks of the roof, but the eave lines. So we designed the house with a sloped roof and tried to keep the eave lines as low as possible. So I'll pass around this picture, but the very front of the garage, the eave line's at 10 feet. The porch, the eave line's at 10'8". The front, the gable end that sticks out, the eave line's at 19'8". The peak of that gable is at 24'2". The other fascia from the second floor is only at 18'4", and then the top line of the roof going across is the 25 feet. But as you look at the house from the street, you're looking up, so that 25 feet will actually seem lower than the front gable in front of it.
Could you address whether this could be a 1.5-story house? What would you lose or gain in terms of function, or how did you arrive at a 2-story design? I did watch the Planning Commission both meetings, and I could understand the reason for needing to upgrade the house given the existing configuration. But could you talk a little bit about how you determined to
Sure.
go with a 2-story design?
There are a lot of development guidelines in St. Helena, and they're very specific. The lot's 160 square feet. You have a lot coverage guideline of 45%. We want to make sure we were under that. You have a floor area ratio percentage, and we want to make sure we were under that. You have a maximum height. You have a maximum width of the house at certain sections back from the front of the property. You have setbacks. So we looked at all that information and looked at the size of the house my client wanted, and felt to keep that lot coverage as small as possible, a 2-story house was preferred. And we did the sloped roof to try to minimize it as much as possible. Like if the house was a flat roof with a 25-foot eave all around, it would seem a heck of a lot higher than what you see there. And also all the houses in the neighborhood were a sloped roof. We looked at all the guidelines. None of the guidelines said it must be a 1-story house. So we looked at all the guidelines, tried to comply as best we could, and keep it in the character of the neighborhood. It's as an architect, I want to as much direction as I can get from the ordinance. I mean, the more clear that direction is, the better. So it's a little confusing to me when I follow all the guidelines and then it's called in later, well, it should have been a 1-story house, but it just never said anywhere in the guidelines asking for a 1-story house. And all throughout St. Helena, there's 2-story houses next to 1-story houses.
By guidelines, you're referring to the design criteria?
Yeah.
Additional questions?
That's all I have.
Mr. Doring?
One question for city staff. I think it's clear, but maybe you made it unclear. What general plan are we using?
We used the original general plan.
1993 plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Question to the architect.
Yes.
I understand that. So in answer to Councilmember Coperstein's question, you basically said we were trying to look at all the objective measures in our zoning code and try to work with that. Can you just expand on that a little bit in terms of, and maybe it's not a fair question to you because your job is to deliver what the client wants, but are there choices to be made with respect to the outdoor living space and other areas, other what I would call amenities that affected your decision in terms of the height of the home? In other words, if you were to shrink some of the other amenities, would that affect the home? Or, things like the number of baths, and those are the, I don't know if those are the needs or the wants, and that's a difficult question for us, obviously, but comment on that for a second.
Obviously, if you build a house half the size with 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, you could do it on a similar footprint in 1 story. Obviously a 1-bedroom house with 1 bath is not going to be as big. I try to take in the needs of my client and the guidelines presented to me by the city.
Okay. Additional questions?
I have one other question for our city attorney about the general plan. The plan we adopted that was in effect as of the date of the hearing has a little more in it in terms of design guidelines and neighborhoods and where we're going. Are we prohibited from looking at that, or is it more or less, the applicant the zoning hasn't changed, but the plan has changed since the time they applied and got to the Planning Commission. Is there a problem looking at what's in the current general plan here?
I don't have enough familiarity between the differences between the old general plan and the current general plan to specifically comment on whether or not that would make a difference. My guess, however, is that it wouldn't, because there was a conclusion that was made that the project is consistent with both the general plan and the zoning code. So really, I guess in my opinion, the general plan wasn't the relevant document to consider. I don't know if there's a specific provision of it that you think lends itself to this particular project, but really the design review elements were the ones to focus on.
Okay.
Oh, no, I don't. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Just one other thing, just for protocol's sake. We were given the tapes. Well, they're online, but the links to the two hearings. I watched every single minute of both hearings. I've read the entire staff report. I've read every piece of communication that was delivered to me. I haven't talked to any of the applicants, the appellants. I don't know who they are. I am familiar with the street. I drove by it just a couple days ago. I know the neighborhood fairly well. I mean, it's a small town, so I just wanted to put that on the record.
Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, I think we have to discuss.
Do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'll lead off and put a few things out there and we can talk about it. I think the issue here is a section of the code that Chair Hardy rightfully focused on, which is 17-174-040C, which basically says only the applicant's favor to take reasonable account of the purposes and the design criteria can justify disapproval solely on the basis of design. So the question seems to be, what's reasonable account, of the purposes of design? And I think it's fair to say that at the Planning Commission level, a lot of the focus was on the particular criteria, which was compatibility of the design with the immediate environment. At least that's what most people spoke to, not real specifically other than to say it was a big house and it was going to stick out like a sore thumb, that kind of comment. Like Paul, I spent a lot of time in the neighborhood. I drove around the whole, what people would call the historic West Side, several times. There was some discussion at the Planning Commission that was the neighborhood in the general plan, but that size-wise, it was probably bigger than what most people are thinking of as the immediate environment. But there was a lot of disagreement over what's the immediate environment of this particular home. Is it the two houses on either side and what's across the street, or is it the block? Do you get to count or consider that there's a two-story home behind? I think it's a difficult question. And actually, when I drove all around the West Side, virtually every single block has a mix of bungalows, 1.5-story homes, 2-story homes, basically every single one except this particular block. And there's also a block on Kearney, kind of between Tainter and Spring, where you have a whole row of just very little bungalows. But so to me, one of the distinguishing characteristics of this neighborhood in general is that it's not all the same. And the near West Side is not all the same. And that's, I think, what gives it's part of its character. And it's, I think, one of the reasons people like to live there. And frankly, property is, pretty hot there. There's a couple of homes on the market that the chairman noted during the meeting. It's not a subdivision like where I live and maybe others live, where all of the houses are the same. Its characteristic is that things are different, and I think it's because it grew up over time. And you have houses from the 30s, then people come and build some new houses. And so the question is, do you let that keep happening and let changes occur incrementally, or do we freeze things in time? You know, I think it's a difficult issue with a small house like this, and not just this one, there's several small bungalows. When those houses become obsolete or need to be replaced, is the answer that you can only, you know, in 2020 replicate a bungalow that was built in the 30s? You know, I think that's something to think about. If you say the immediate environment is only 3 or 4 houses, the answer seems to be yes, or at least that's what people think. You know, Chairman Hardy noted that this isn't the first application they're going to see in this neighborhood, and there isn't any escaping impending changes. And it's the land values that are driving what's happening in St. Helena. It's not necessarily just second homeowners or something like that. It's land values. And so I sort of question whether, while the intentions might be good, the outcome of trying to keep everything just as it is will have some results that maybe aren't good for the community. So I am going to talk a little bit about the new comprehensive plan, or not comprehensive, general plan, because, you know, it tells us we're supposed to have design guidelines, and the Planning Commission did kind of struggle with this because we don't have design guidelines yet. We're supposed to have them for different neighborhoods. Are they supposed to now be block by block? Where are we going? But one of the things that's in there is this is in the general plan, I think it's in the design section. It says residential neighborhoods throughout the city possess unique identities. Establishing a flexible set of design guidelines or form-based codes for specific areas can ensure that new development and remodels complement the distinct character of St. Helena's existing neighborhoods, while allowing for design innovations to accommodate modern needs and tastes. And I think that's where we find the rub, the desire for a more modern house or taste. How can you achieve that in 1,400, square feet? The plan talks about, in addition to design guidelines, we're supposed to complement the character by incorporating design features such as front porches, facade articulation, setbacks. And I see some effort here to do some of that. So, I'm kind of struggling with this because I don't know what this means for this little block and that one little block on Kearney. If are we saying that you could never have a 2-story house there, or even a 1.5, because there are none, particularly over on Kearney. One other thing that Lester mentioned, and I agree with this, he said we have to be respectful of community sentiment. At the same time, to the extent we can, we have to interpret and apply the general plan and the zoning ordinance in a way that provides meaningful guidance to applicants. If the process devolves into a popularity contest, the terms of the ordinance and the guiding policies become virtually irrelevant, and that is a bad place to go. There will always be hard cases that challenge the ability to find balance. We need to find criteria or when criteria or findings become meaningless. Excuse me. We need criteria or our findings become meaningless and arbitrary. And that's kind of my concern. If we do uphold this decision of the Planning Commission, what is the new line or rule that we are creating that the next applicant can rely on? Is it that you cannot consider a two-story house if on either side of you and across the street you don't have one, or if you go 3 houses on either side? You know, what is the rule? And I'm a person who believes firmly in ordinances and trying to follow them. And I'm focused on this. The only justification for denial is that the applicant didn't take reasonable account of the purposes of a design review and the criteria. So I guess it might, if you can say one factor ends it, you know, I'm just searching for what does the next applicant take from this?
Thank you, Mr. Doring. Is your mic on?
I don't have much more to add to what Councilmember Koberstein has said. I recognize the issues. Just for me, I think just head on, I think it's slightly too big. I think it's a very beautiful design. I wouldn't mind living in that house. It's really a close call. For me, I'm just looking at the photo that was submitted. It seems a little large. That's all. We're talking 3 or 4, maybe 500 square feet reduction would solve the problem, and that's why I asked the questions I asked. It does not seem compatible, in my view, with the immediate environment. It's a beautiful home. I would encourage some kind of a resolution that is not hey, we're going to pick up and leave. There's got to be a design that can accommodate both parties reasonably. I agree that it is a subjective issue. We're presented with subjective issues. I'm a lawyer. I'm not an architect. I'm not a designer. I think it's a beautiful design. It's slightly larger than most of the houses. You know, I don't know what the square footage of these houses are, you know, to the left or to the right of the home, but I know they're not 24 or 2,500 square feet. If they were, then I would probably be more inclined to look at that a little more closely. So that's where I'm coming from. I tend to be deferential to the Planning Commission because this is what they do every day, unless the Planning Commission went off the rails in some way, and I don't think they have here. It's a close call. I respect their decision. It's a 4-1 vote. So that's kind of where I am. I would likely uphold the Planning Commission's decision at this point. Again, extremely close call. I could go either way on this, but I see it as slightly larger than it needs to be, and I see the points that Councilmember Koberstein is making. Excellent points for sure. So that's where I am.
Can I just ask, when you say too big, are you focusing on the height or the floor area or both of them?
I'm focusing more on a massing issue, not the height. The height, the 2-story, the points that you're making, you can get a 2-story home that would probably still be compatible. I think you may slightly overstate the issue in terms of it's either 1-story or 2-story. I don't look at it that way. I don't analyze it that way. I look at it as a little bit more large in terms of its massing. The height is not, I'm just looking at the photographs, so the height is not of concern to me. I'm comparing it really, the different sizes of the homes. These are, you know, you have 1,000 square foot home, maybe 1,100. Some of these other homes are in that area. There may be one that's a little larger on a larger lot further down. That's kind of what I'm looking at, the square footage. I don't have enough information. I'm speculating to a certain degree as to what the sizes are, but it's just the information that's in front of me leads me to believe that this house is much larger, twice as large as these other homes.
Ms. Koberstein, any additional?
Well, we do have the authority to also modify or ask the applicant if she is willing to maybe bring back a modified design. Before I get there, back in the days when I was on the Planning Commission, I used to go to the assessor's website and kind of take a look at what the exact size of the other homes in the neighborhood is, because it's pretty hard to figure it out from the sidewalk, which is how most people perceive a house and perceive the bulk. And it is true, no doubt about it, that there are several homes right in this immediate vicinity from here going down to Adams, where the one next door is like 1,036 square feet. You go up a little bit on the east side of the street. There's one that popped up at like 2,136. I mean, who would know? And of course, there are bigger homes the further you go up Stockton. So the question is, what's the immediate environment, and what is the what's a reasonable showing that you took reasonable consideration of that particular standard? Does the front porch count for anything? Does the articulation of the roof count for anything? I mean, I have to say, of all the bungalows on the street, this is probably the least attractive. It doesn't have any of the nice arch kind of California bungalow characteristics that a lot of the others do. So a remodel, I don't think, and it wasn't considered a historic property. But the only other choice would be to, well, if you're not bothered by the two-story, I guess, is to cut down the size a little bit. Or you build a one-story home, which I think a little bit bigger, you start to have functional issues in terms of light and air inside the house and things like that. So it's a very difficult case, and I'm concerned about what the precedent is and if it's really going to be understood, whatever we do tonight, what that means as far as moving forward with a design review.
I'd like to ask the city manager a question. In terms of resubmittal of a design, is the process for that, or to the planning director?
Yeah, actually, I was just looking through the municipal code right now to see if there's, in some jurisdictions, there's a certain amount of time that an applicant must wait before they resubmit if they're going to submit a new application. Assuming there's some waiting period, then we would, reprocess their application. It would go back through design review to Planning Commission. Hopefully that would be a design that, of course, with staff recommendation to approve, that the Planning Commission could also make acceptable findings to approve as well.
So that,
But
go ahead.
we have the authority to modify the design right here. Either approve, grant the appeal, deny the appeal, or modify. Is that correct?
So the authority that the council has is to approve, deny, or modify the Planning Commission's decision.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, any modifications to the design would have to be basically agreed to by the project applicant.
Okay.
And if I could ask, when the approve, deny, or modify the Planning Commission decision, what would an example of modifying a Planning Commission decision?
So, for example, the Planning Commission made a finding regarding why it denied the application. Mm-hmm. So, you as City Council could uphold that decision based on the same or similar reasoning, or you could find a different reason. So that would basically be a modification as to what the Planning Commission did.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Maybe we can ask the applicant if she wants up and down vote, or what.
I think we have to do an up or down vote.
I guess what I'm asking is, she at all interested in modifying the design and going back?
Yes, if you'd like to come up.
I think my biggest concern is that I've been going through this process for a year, and I've spent a lot of money on it, a lot of money to the city, and these people's objection to it has to do with the height, I believe. So I don't think it's going to work if we go back, and I just, not the height. I shouldn't even say the height. I should say the fact that it's 2 stories. just to speak a little bit more to the reasoning why we didn't do a bigger one-story house, as Ms. Koberstein was alluding to, it's pretty difficult to get, a long, narrow house that's only 30 feet wide with 3 bedrooms to get good natural light into a bedroom, or you have to make a lot of trade-offs and lose a lot of backyard space. This lot isn't that small. 6,500 square feet is really not that small. It's there's enough space there for us to have decent outdoor living and a pool even, and I think what's totally being taken away from us is our enjoyment of this property and what works for my family, not works for, my neighbors and their 1 and 2 bedroom or, smaller homes. That's fine. But I don't think that we should be limited based, on exactly how those little houses were built a long time ago, where mine was built much later, and it doesn't have the same charm and character. It's very small. I think trying to expand it on its current, even with its current footprint, we have to come in. I mean, we've spent so much time on this. You have to know that that's the case. We've spent a lot of time. We've been very deliberate and thoughtful. And would I be willing to come back and modify it? I mean, we could try, but I'm not going to go through another year. I don't think that's fair to us. I have no guarantee I won't have the same outcome. Where do I get an answer? Because we followed the code, we followed the guidelines, and I have nothing to point to change that will get it passed, because it's all based on what the neighbors want. So, I mean, if someone can tell me, would you be willing to, and then we have everyone come up and say, okay, I agree. I mean, I don't know how we designed by consensus, or if I, as the property owner, get a little bit more input, or a little bit more weight to our desires. But.
Thank you.
I guess I'm looking for objective guidelines, and it concerns me that we followed all the objective guidelines, and then after the design's done, the applicant's been in the process for 9 months, we find out, no, there's a guideline that you can't build a 2-story house. Well, there isn't any guideline in the code that says you can't build a 2-story house. So if you do decide to vote this down, I would suggest you actually change the ordinance and say, no, you cannot build a 2-story house next to a 1-story house, or something very clear that makes so applicants and architects aren't spending a year trying to do design, which no one seems to have an issue with the actual design. The mainly issue is that it's a 2-story house. So if you do decide you do not want 2-story houses next to 1-story houses, I'd recommend that just be put in the city ordinance and make it objective instead of a subjective issue like this. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'll bring it back up to the council. So are we, with that, my thoughts are, I'm leaning towards echoing Mr. Doring's thoughts. I understand Ms. Koberstein in saying that we need to be able to update what we have here, but I do also believe that there's a scale to be considered, and so I'm sort of echoing Mr. Doring on concern with the scale, and the idea that the applicant would consider coming back with a modified approach that's more in scale. That's sort of where I am. Is there any other?
What does that mean? I mean, this is my whole sort of issue with these kind of cases, is what kind of direction are we giving people as to what satisfies these standards? And is the rule that we can find that one of these design criteria, a majority of people don't think it flies, so that means that reasonable account was not taken of all the standards? I'm just That's my issue with this case. That's my problem with this case.
Mr. Doring, any?
I will make a motion that we uphold the Planning Commission's decision and direct our staff to prepare a draft resolution and findings sustaining the Planning Commission's denial of a demolition permit and design review for 1443 Stockton Street.
And, in deference also to the Planning Commission who made this decision, I will second that.
If I could just ask for some additional clarification and information, if this motion ultimately were to be adopted by the council, staff would need a little bit more direction just in terms of what specifically you would like to have in the resolution, assumingly under the criterion about the incompatibility of design with the immediate environment of the site. I mean, it sounds like you're talking about primarily mass and scale. I don't know if you have other factors in mind that you would want to have go into that resolution.
Correct. I think that the information that's before us from the Planning Commission is sufficient. We've added more detail here, but I don't think there's a need to greatly expand upon what the Planning Commission has already stated in denying the application.
Okay. Yeah, the Planning Commission had a finding basically saying that it wasn't compatible with the immediate environment, and so if the council had any additional reasons to put into the resolution concerning why specifically it's finding that the proposed project is incompatible.
And to be clear, I don't have any other reasons other than that.
Right.
To be specific, I'd rather have more of a narrow finding. I think they're right. I think on every other measurement of a design criteria, I think I'm satisfied with that. On the compatibility with the immediate environment, I think that there's a problem there. And so therefore, I would conclude that they haven't reasonably considered that one criteria. Others may differ, but that's how I see it.
No, I'm satisfied with the Planning Commission's.
Ready?
Yes.
Is it okay for a public question?
We've closed the public comment at this point.
Question?
We've closed that at this point.
Roll
And
call?
so roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
No.
Thank you. Okay, so that is that item, and we will move on now to our new business. And I would like to.
Old business.
Do you want to take a little? Should we take a break for a moment?
You have options in terms of which item you would like to take next.
I would like to ask the council if there's no. Let's get David back in here. Did you have one? Okay. So, coming into if there's no council objection, I'd like to discuss moving item 11.3, which is the discussion and direction regarding flavored tobacco and e-cigarette products, to now before 10.1. We have some patient young people here that I'd like to see if we can get them up to advocate. So if there's no objection, okay, we'll do that item now. This is 11.3. And this is discussion and direction regarding flavored tobacco and e-cigarette products. This is Priya Nixon, our assistant to the city manager.
Oh, okay.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Again, this is Priya Nixon, Assistant to the City Manager, and I am here to present the staff report on the discussion and direction regarding flavored tobacco and e-cigarette products. So what I've done is I've written a pretty detailed staff report. I thought it would be helpful if we briefly summarized and went over some of the items of interest. So I've prepared a PowerPoint that I'd like to show and talk about. We're just loading it in. So while it's loading, I can get started. What I wanted to do is just give a brief overview, and this is in the staff report, of some of the legislative action that's happened regarding tobacco. So in 2008, the City Council approved an ordinance which prohibited smoking in various locations in all public buildings within 20 feet of public buildings, at all sports facilities and sports spectator areas, and smoking at playground structures located within city limits. And then in 2012, that chapter was amended to include parks. And then in 2018, there was another amendment that included the use of electronic smoking devices and electronic cigarettes within the smoking regulations. So I thought that would be helpful just to give you some background on the legislative history. And I wanted to go over just a little bit of some of the research. So I did a lot of research in preparing the staff report, and I've included some attachments that I think are very helpful from the CDC and the California Department of Public Health. Just wanted to go over a little bit of that. So flavored tobacco is defined as any tobacco product that contains a constituent that imparts a characterizing flavor. There are a lot of different flavors, and they have various names that are enticing to youth, including bubblegum and unicorn pop, and they're kind of considered starter products, and they're highly addictive. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I talk about some of the outreach. And so we're noticing in the research that electronic flavored tobacco and electronic cigarettes are one of the most used flavored tobacco products out there, in addition, if you compare that to cigarettes. So I think that's a pretty significant fact. And then just talking a little bit about prohibition, I have here that tobacco and vape shops have the lowest compliance when it comes to enforcing regulations regarding tobacco. I think that's, I put that in the staff report as well. So I did do a little bit of research and communicated with some of the businesses and found that there are businesses, 3 in the city limits, that do sell vaping products. And so one of the items that I think is really important is to reach out to stakeholders. So we actually I did a fair amount of that. So I've listed all the stakeholders that we've reached out to: the Up Valley Family Centers. I had a conversation with the American Lung Association, with Adventist Health, the Catalyst Coalition, and Tobacco Free Napa. And I want to highlight some of the feedback that we've received. So vaping and tobacco products as a public health threat for youth, the accessibility of these products and how that impacts this public health threat, and then the youth themselves as seeing this as a concern. And then banning as a effective prevention method, and prevention should really be a focus. Again, this is the feedback that I've received from these community stakeholders. And then the last item is just, in addition to the pulmonary concerns, we know that the brain stops developing at age 25. So I talked a little bit about the addictive nature of the flavored tobacco. And so if someone starts that at a young age, that can have impacts on brain development. So that's some of the feedback. The other thing that I wanted to mention that I did is I wanted to provide a balanced view. So I actually reached out to Juul. I did not hear back from them. And then I also reached out to the CEO of the American Petroleum and Convenience Store Association just to hear a little bit about what their thoughts are on banning products, and so they really see themselves as a first line of defense to prevention, and they want to work with local law enforcement and municipalities when it comes to this. But they also talked a little bit about the impact that it has on inventory and revenue sources. So one of the things that they said was for the municipalities that have enacted bans prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco, it was really important to communicate with the stores and to make sure that there was enough time so that they could, change their inventory strategy. So I think that's some of the background that I wanted to provide, and we can go to the next slide. So this is really hard to read, but it is in the staff report. And what I wanted to do here was just showcase some of the actions by other agencies. And so I will briefly just go over this. So prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco, prohibiting the sale of e-cigarettes, prohibiting the sale of cigarettes with menthol flavor, and then imposing proximity requirements for new tobacco retailers. So some agencies will do that based on the location of a store to another store or a store to a park. Some of them require a tobacco retailer license. The city of St. Helena does not currently do this, but we do require a conditional use permit for tobacco stores. So like a cigar shop would require that. We do not currently have a cigar shop in the city, so there are no active conditional use permits. And then I also wanted to list prohibiting the sale of tobacco products specifically in pharmacies. And then the last two columns are the prohibiting smoking in public parks, and then adding e-cigarettes to the definition of e-cigarettes to smoking regulations. So I just wanted to make sure, I know it's hard to see that that is some of the research that we did on the agencies. We can go to the next one. So I provided a little bit of background, the research that we did, the feedback from stakeholders, and really tonight we've put some policy options that we're looking for feedback. And so those policy options are prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco products, institute a tobacco retailer licensing program, prohibiting the sale of tobacco products in pharmacies, institute proximity requirements for stores that sell tobacco, and prohibiting the sale of cigarettes and e-cigarettes that include menthol. So that is the conclusion of my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any initial council questions? Okay. Mary, do you have a question? Okay, seeing that, I'm going to open the public comment, and we'll take public comment and then bring it back for council discussion.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Dr. Karen Reluccio. I'm the Public Health Officer and Public Health Director of Napa County. I'm here to talk about health issues that are associated with electronic smoking devices. And just to, I think Priya gave a really great background of what has happened, but we were faced with e-cigarettes in 2007, which has then skyrocketed in popularity. And they were marketed as a smoking cessation tool that is safer than traditional cigarettes. Fast forward over a decade, we're now in the midst of a vaping epidemic, especially among youth and young adults. So the tobacco industry has advertised e-cigarettes as producing a harmless water vapor, yet the liquid that is vaped contains nicotine, propylene glycol, which is found in antifreeze, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is found in marijuana and causes the mind-altering effects, and other flavorings, additives, and other toxic chemicals. And the products of combustion of e-cigarette juice include heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, and fine particulate matter that can cause disease. So the FDA and the Surgeon General have warned that flavored tobacco products help new users establish habits that lead to long-term addiction. And the current products are really dangerous. They are marketed to youth and they have high doses of nicotine, with the Juul pod having as much nicotine as the entire pack of cigarettes, which is 20 cigarettes. And the product is designed so that youth vape it really fast. So then there could be acute toxic effects as a result. So let me talk about some direct health effects of nicotine, and let me start first with the lungs. I would like to talk about the epidemic that's going across the United States, which is the e-cigarette vaping lung-associated injury, or EVALI. So across the United States and U.S. territories, there are 2,668 hospitalizations with 60 confirmed deaths. And across California, there are 201 cases with 4 deaths, one in our neighboring county, Marin County. There has been one reported case in Napa County, and luckily that person recovered. So of the 2,668 hospitalized cases reported to CDC and CDPH, over 60% were male, and the median age is 24 to 25 years, depending on the state to federal statistics. And the range of the age has ranged from 13 to 85 years. So I just want to talk about the disease itself. So it's a really significant disease that practically causes chemical burns to the lungs. So 45% of cases in California required admission to the intensive care unit. And almost 30% of these patients had to be on a ventilator. Now, if you look at this and you compare it to bacterial pneumonia or community-acquired pneumonia, it is like it's anywhere from 3 to 5 times as high of being put on a ventilator as pneumonia. So just to put that into perspective. So vitamin E acetate is strongly linked to the EVALI outbreak and has been found in product samples, and it was also found in tissue samples in people that got the disease. However, there's other chemicals that may be contributing to this, and it's not the sole culprit. So I'm going to go, so let's start with that. But there is also another lung disease that has been associated with this, which is called popcorn lung, and the clinical definition is bronchiolitis obliterans, but it's easier to say popcorn lung. And what that is caused by is diacetyl, which is a component of the fruity and candy flavors in these products. So aside from the lungs, I'm going to start with the brain. So nicotine is a highly addictive neurotoxin that stimulates the pleasure and reward pathways in the brain. And it is as addictive as heroin and cocaine. So it alters the structure and function of the brain and predisposes future tobacco use into adulthood. And studies in human subjects indicate that smoking during adolescence increases the risk of developing psychiatric disorders and cognitive impairment in later life. In addition, nicotine use during adolescence results in attention deficits, which increases with years of smoking. Adolescent smokers show reduced memory and attention and have increased risk of behavioral disturbances, including substance use and mental health problems. And then the other part that it affects is the cardiovascular system and reproductive systems. It causes blood pressure, vessels to constrict. It raises the pulse and blood pressure. It leads to increase of risk of heart attacks and strokes. It also contributes to low birth weight, preterm delivery, and stillbirth, and increases the risk of cancer by damaging DNA and causes mutation and enhances cancer growth. And this has been seen with e-cigarettes also. There's also such thing as secondary vape exposure. So people that have been around people that are vaping have as much nicotine in their bloodstream as somebody that vapes. And they're also exposed to the same chemicals that somebody who primarily vapes does. So we also put other people at risk as a result. So I want to talk about cessation claims. So there's no scientific evidence that e-cigarettes help smokers successfully quit or reduce consumption of traditional cigarettes, and in fact lead to dual use. So people end up using both e-cigarettes and traditional cigarettes. And so in conclusion, e-cigarettes are a public health concern. They're very addictive. They have led to the next generation of nicotine addiction. So basically you have youth that have now been addicted to cigarettes or nicotine products through vaping, with the flavors actually contributing to their desire to be used. And what's unfortunate is that the unregulated and predatory advertising encourages uptake of vaping by youth and young adults, and they are not proven to help smokers quit smoking. And as per my presentation, it clearly has negative health effects. Thank you.
So
Just one question before you leave. I'm curious, do you know what regulatory efforts the County of Napa is taking to address this epidemic, if any?
So at this time, there has been some of efforts in the city of Napa. The county has addressed it through. You're gonna have to help me out here, but they've addressed it through the products that are the definition. Yeah, it's only been through the definitions of what smoking is, which adds vapes into that, and it is really honestly up to political will. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Is there additional public comment?
Of course. Good evening, Mayor Ellsworth, Vice Mayor Doring, and council members. My name is Regina Penna, and I'm the program coordinator for the Up Valley Partnership for Youth. I've spoken with you before about social host ordinance here. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the coalition and why we're here tonight. Our coalition is represented by providers, community health providers, law enforcement, schools, business, parents, and youth, a whole broad cross-section of people, about 40 persons and agencies in Calistoga and St. Helena. We're just a little over 4 years old, and during that time we've helped promote some tremendous policy initiatives here, specifically in the city of St. Helena. Not too long ago, you passed a strengthening of your social host ordinance, which includes not only infractions for persons who knowingly serve alcohol to minors. It expanded that definition to include marijuana and other intoxicating substances. Your foresight in doing that has helped push that ordinance through the rest of the county. The Board of Supervisors in December adopted the same language that you all did, and American Canyon and Yountville are following suit as well. So I applaud you for that. We've also expanded our parent and youth education programs in our communities and schools. These were designed in response to community focus groups that we conducted here. Working with our community partners over the past few years, we've seen some dramatic reductions in marijuana and alcohol consumption by our local youth, and that looks specifically at our youth here in St. Helena. However, there's one substance which has shown itself to be very troubling, and that's vaping. While other substances have declined, vaping has skyrocketed, not only here, but around the country. Locally, we have seen in St. Helena a 20% increase in the number of ninth graders who are vaping, and that's just in the past 5 years. When the Up Valley Partnership started 4 years ago, vaping wasn't on anyone's agenda. Now it's on everybody's. The first Surgeon General's report was published in 1964, 56 years ago. We've had 60 years of studies and information volumes that we've garnered on the impact of tobacco on people. We have made tremendous strides in moving towards finally having a tobacco-free generation. Enter vaping. Less than 10 years old, and these products are less than 10 years old, and we're addicting a whole new generation to tobacco. As Dr. Relucio said, the CDC is now tracking the number of persons who die or who are hospitalized from E-Valley. Last week, we topped 60 people who have died and almost 2,700 who are hospitalized. With youth who use these electronic products, we're seeing that they are 4 times more likely to cross over and start using traditional combustible tobacco products. We're actually moving backwards as far as our children's health. Tonight we brought together local experts, citizens who want to share with you and talk about some possible actions that we can incorporate here in our community to help protect our youth. More importantly, we've brought together some of our youth, local youth, they would like you to hear from their perspective. They're passionate, eloquent, and they want you to hear what they have to say and how this impacts them and their constituents. Lastly, please know that we are all here to help you now and in the future, whatever you decide to do on this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hello. Welcome.
My name is Jessica Chapin, and I am the Project Director for Tobacco Control with Napa County Public Health. I am also the co-chair of the Coalition for Tobacco-Free Napa. 1 year ago, on January 22nd, 2019, Dr. Lucio and I presented to the St. Helena City Council on this very issue. At that time, we were starting to see an increase in youth use rates and research that indicated that these products were not safe. In the last year, we have seen the emergence of severe and immediate illness associated with some vaping products and a continued rise in youth vaping across the nation and in this very community. We are so happy to be here continuing the conversation with an additional set of community voices to help explain the experience. It is the role of public health to educate the public and advise policymakers on threats to the health of the community. While connecting people with behavioral health services and increasing personal knowledge among community members is an important component of our work, we know that real improvements in community health are achieved when the environments in which people live, work, and play are conducive to optimum health. And this is most often achieved via policies that promote access to health and limit access and exposure to things that threaten health. In terms of tobacco policy, in California, there's been 30 years of tobacco control since Prop 99 in the late 80s. And in that time, we've made remarkable strides. It is now our expectation that we will ride on airplanes, we will dine in restaurants, and we will go maybe to bars and workplaces where there is not secondhand smoke exposure. And that policy has really denormalized smoking in our communities. We have one of the lowest adult smoking rates in the nation, second only to the state of Utah. And that's remarkable. However, these new products that are marketed to kids are creating a new generation of addicts and normalizing vaping. As flavored tobacco consumption has skyrocketed, jurisdictions across California are adopting new policies to counter this. One of the most effective interventions to keep kids from accessing tobacco products is enacting a policy to regulate and restrict the sales of tobacco products, including flavored and menthol products. A tobacco retail licensing ordinance allows for local oversight of tobacco retailers and enforcement of policy provisions that suit the community needs. Over 150 California cities and counties have adopted tobacco retail licensing programs. Among our neighbors, Sonoma, Healdsburg, Davis, Winters, Woodland, Novato, San Rafael, Sausalito, and most recently Benicia have adopted them. Effective retail licensing laws include requirements that all tobacco retailers must obtain a license and renew it annually, a fee set high enough to sufficiently fund an effective program, including administration and enforcement, an enforcement plan that includes compliance checks, coordination of tobacco regulations so that a violation of any existing local, state, or federal tobacco regulation violates the license, and a financial deterrent through fines and penalties, including the suspension and revocation of that license. In addition, tobacco retail licensing policies can include specific provisions, such as restrictions or bans on sales of flavor products or electronic smoking devices, and prohibition of retailers within 1,000 feet of schools, parks, and other youth-sensitive areas. Policies that restrict the sale of flavored tobacco have the potential to curb youth tobacco use in as few as 6 months. A study from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health compared the impact on youth tobacco use between two towns with similar demographics, and the data showed that teen use in the community with a ban decreased markedly in 6 months. In addition, 41 California communities were studied in 2018, and in all jurisdictions, youth sales rates decreased, sometimes to zero, after adoption of a tobacco retail license. I brought with me some materials, including lists of communities that have adopted the policies and different provisions of those policies, and also some model ordinance language for you. Thank you very much.
Just one question before you sit down, if you can answer the question. So we have apparently 3 retail operations that sell these vaping devices for lack of I don't want to say the long term, but do we know that that's a source of the supply for youth? And by youth, I mean under the age of 21. If we don't know that, then what is the source?
Is this on? There are some studies that do show that the majority of the products are obtained locally through retail. The tobacco companies would like you to believe that it's more of a social issue of people passing them amongst peers and older people buying them for the young adults.
No, I don't have any preconceived notion of that. Maybe the youth will also add to that, because that's a question that I think it's important to focus in on the issue. You know, it's a very broad issue, but we're in St. Helene. We want to focus in on where we can do the best work, and so that's why I asked that question, because if it's not the retailers and it's some other source, and then that makes our ordinance kind of not very valuable to a certain degree. And I agree that there's a ban is, you know, there are benefits to having a ban for sure in this regard, but I just want to focus in on that. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Do we have additional?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Nancy Winder Rivera. I'm a project coordinator for the tobacco program here in Napa, and I'm also part of the Tobacco Free Napa and a member of the Partnership for Youth, a Valley Partnership for Youth. So the tobacco industry has a long history of using flavored tobacco to target youth and hook the next generation of smokers of a lifetime of addiction. The majority of the youth who start experimenting with tobacco begin with a flavored product. These products come in a variety of flavors, including youth-oriented e-cigarette flavors like bubble gum, gummy bear, and cotton candy, and also 20 different types of unicorn flavors, like unicorn poop, unicorn puke. You wouldn't believe it. Yes. Yeah, I look at them. And also some cartoon characters like Smurf and Daisy Duck. So a National Institute of Health study says 4 out of 5 kids who vape nicotine use flavors. So I took the work to look what are the #1 flavors, and actually bubblegum historically has been the #1, but I looked in some sites and I found blue raspberry cotton candy, watermelon wave, unicorn milk, and I love cookies too. I wish I could show you pictures, because if you see them, they are specifically designed for kids, because they have all the colors, all the things, and many of them, like cereals or cookie, they look exactly like the products that our youth eat as well. So flavors mask the harsh taste of tobacco, which makes it easier for kids to smoke or to vape. And most kids do not know that the flavors e-cigarettes are high in nicotine. It is unlikely that the teens who are using these products understand how much nicotine they are ingesting. Aside from being addictive, nicotine itself is harmful, like Dr. Relucio talked about it. And in addition, the nicotine, there is also other chemicals, like she mentioned, that we are just starting to learn all the risks associated with the use of them. With more than 15,500 flavors available, e-juices available in the market, it's not surprising that 1 in 8 high school students in California currently use a tobacco product. As flavored tobacco consumption has escalated, state and local jurisdictions in California are working to curb the problem. One of the strongest interventions to promote the health of future generations is enacting a policy to restrict the sales of flavored and menthol tobacco products. Studies demonstrate that a flavored tobacco sales restriction can decrease the availability and sales of those tobacco products in a community. Reduced access is associated with a lower likelihood of teens ever using a tobacco product in the first place. There are more than 55 jurisdictions in California and over 250 in the country with policies that restrict the sales of tobacco products, including many nearby cities like Dublin, Benicia, Cloverdale, and Sonoma, and counties such as Marin, Alameda, and Contra Costa. The tobacco industry spends over $10 million a year advertising and trying to hook our kids. So we need to do the best we can to help our community and protect our youth. E-juice flavors, along with the sleek technological design of vaping devices like the Juul, appeal to the kids. So addiction happens really fast and is a lifelong nicotine habit. We have to protect the young people of our community from these dangerous products and the chemicals they have.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Bobby Monette. I'm here as a member of the Tobacco Coalition and as a private citizen and as someone who worked at Kaiser Chemical Diminished Recovery Program with teens and parents and family groups, adults, for decades. So, can't read this. So first of all, I'd like to say that it always gets my attention when I read that a proposed government restraint aimed at protecting public health, particularly the health of our children, is withdrawn in response to revenue loss complaints by those profiting by contributing to the public health risk. Yes, we need flourishing businesses, and I have a proposal at the end here in our community. With those businesses, when those businesses are selling products that are found to be harmful to their customers, to their consumers, it makes sense that they stop providing them. If they will not volunteer to do so, it makes sense to make some regulations so that there will be a penalty for contributing to continue to contribute to the public health issue. So we heard a lot about the physiological effects of nicotine. The ones that I want to just mention are psychological effects. The first one being that it's a gateway drug. And attached to that is that it introduces children or anyone who's using them to an addictive brain physiology. That is to say, you use to get a feeling, and then after a while you use to get normal. Like when you wake up in the morning, you're in withdrawal from caffeine. So you use your first cup of coffee to get normal. So what you learn to do is live an addictive lifestyle. And this is a gateway into that, to be getting used to that. But more importantly is that, and in recovery, recovery is about learning functional emotion regulation skills. Functional emotion regulation skills are those skills where you can manage your emotions without hurting yourself or anyone else. So if you are using a drug to regulate emotion, which anyone who's using a drug, people don't relapse because they're craving. They relapse because something happens, they have an emotion response, they get anxious, and they light up, or they vape, or whatever. So it's very important if kids are going to be introduced, and adults, to functional emotion regulation skills like meditation, talking to someone, joining in the community in positive ways and that sort of thing. There's a lot out there. We're in a very rich neighborhood for that sort of thing. They're not going to go in that direction if they are used to using chemicals for emotion regulation. So you can ask yourself how much you do that, and we all do it to some extent. So it normalizes addictive physiology and so forth. So I think I would like to ask that I encourage you to consider banning, as a cutting edge city council, consider banning all sale of all vaping devices within the city of St. Helena for the benefit of everyone here, not just the kids, but everyone. And I have a modest proposal for the businesses that profit from these sales. I propose that we find out how much revenue the businesses who sell these deadly devices will lose in the first year after they're banned. I propose that we use some of our city revenue or have a community fundraiser in order to subsidize these businesses by covering their losses for 1 year, during which time they can strategize how to make up for this loss going forward by cutting costs and or selling more life-affirming products, or something else. I propose that the city, perhaps with the help of the mediator who we've used in the past, could sponsor a dialogue between the owners of these businesses that are currently distributing vaping products and a committee representing community members, teens and adults concerned about the public health issues that these products pose, with the goal of finding common ground upon which to develop helpful responses to the initial costs of keeping our community free from this deadly health risk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there additional public comment?
Hello, everybody. My name is Reese Darlene, and I'm a representative from SAFE, Students Against Flavored E-Cigarettes. The issue of vaping didn't really come to my attention until about April of 2019, when the first outbreak of E-Valley, or vaping disease, was discovered. And I'm not here necessarily to tell you the statistics that you may already know, but more of to give you a student's perspective. So some people think that out of 7.8 billion people, 60 doesn't sound like a lot. However, 60 people is all of my friends. 60 people is all of my family. 60 people is the majority of my grade. And that really freaks me out. And not only are 60 people dead from this disease, but 2,268 are infected with it. And that is just a little less than half of St. Helena. And the other day I was walking around kind of just asking people what their view on vaping was, because I wanted to know who else had an opinion or who else knew about the issue at all. And I found that almost nobody at my school knew or cared about the vaping issue. And I just wanted to point out that as soon as anybody found out that romaine lettuce was contaminated, it was out of all of the stores and everybody avoided it like the Black Plague. But here we are with this device that's killing people, and I did a bunch of research and we can still find it in like 30 places in Napa County. And I don't think that's acceptable, I guess. And I just wanted to say one more thing, that like the people before me have said, in vapes there are flavors such as unicorn poop and Candy King and like Kool-Aid. And I can't exactly picture adults who are trying to quit smoking walking around with these. These are obviously targeted towards kids. And a little more to add on to that is the kids won't do these unless they feel like it's either not illegal or like they can never get caught doing it. Because they don't exactly want to just walk into a teacher's classroom doing this. They're scared they're going to get caught. And so to make the teens feel more safe, I guess, they're disguising them. There are things like you can hide them as inhalers, and there's this online website called Vaporware where the vape is actually inside of the clothing. Like sometimes on hoodies, they're little like strings, and if you just pick it up, there's the vape right there, and it's disguised. And so there's also things like little plugs that can go on to the end of a specific brand Juul, because they look like USB drives, and they're little things that you can clip onto the end that make it look like that's the actual port that looks like it goes into a computer. And so they're obviously trying to target teens with that. And so that's why I propose, for the sake of all of our local kids, we should ban vapes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and speaking. Is there additional comment?
Hi, my name is Beatrice Naganostakis, and I'm another rep from SAFE, and I'm here to also explain what I think about e-cigarettes or vapes. To the people who vape, your life isn't the only one that's being affected. You have people in this world who care about your health and well-being. You aren't just hurting yourselves, but you are hurting the people who want to help. It kills me when I see, better yet, know or love someone who's starting to vape, because I know that they're slowly but surely hurting themselves. And if they do it around me, well, I don't want to be around them anymore, because I know that they're also hurting me. Thinking of loved ones having a greater risk of dying just because they're now addicted to this poison makes me want to jump into action and reason with them, help them. I've tried. I've given people heart-to-hearts, straight facts, but almost every time I've gotten the response is, at least I'm not actually smoking, or it's not that bad, you're just overreacting. It might sound simple in your head, but in reality it's not as straightforward as it seems. There's this experiment called the boiling frog experiment, I think it's called. And in this experiment you have a pot of boiling water and you put a frog in it, and the frog will jump out immediately because it knows that something is wrong. But you put a frog in a regular pot of water and you start to make it boil, and the frog won't know what's going on until it's too late. That's what happens to people who vape when they don't start to react in time and they don't fix their problems. Thousands have become hospitalized, and some even die. And it doesn't help that other diseases are being spread because people share vapes or sell old ones. I know that when a person is low on money or has an old vape that they don't use anymore, their first resort is to sell the vape because it's too expensive to let it go to waste. Germs are spread from person to person, and no one seems to care. I asked some friends to give me their perspective on vaping, and here's what I got. It's immature of brands to promote to teens. Another said, vaping leads to someone doing more hardcore drugs, like regular cigarettes, acids, or mushrooms. Someone added this is one of those things where the bad outweighs the good feeling or sensation you get from vaping. Some people don't just understand that. You can't count on teens to always make the right decisions. We want to try new things, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Adults can't rely on kids to fix this entire problem. This is where you guys come in handy. We can't really change anything without your help. So for the sake of the people you know and love, making sure that they don't fall down this deep, dark hole, we need your help to stop vaping and ban the production of vapes in Napa County or St. Helena. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there additional comment?
So hi, I'm Eva Williams. I'm an 8th grader at RLS Middle School, and I'm also a representative of SAFE, Students Against Flavored E-Cigarettes. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with the widespread vaping issue. It's kind of all over the news right now. The use of e-cigarettes, more commonly recognized by the youth as vaping, has become a nationwide problem that has resulted in so far 60 deaths. In late June, San Francisco's Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to approve a first-of-its-kind ban on e-cigarette sales. However, nothing else seems to be happening to take steps toward ending the vaping problem. In fact, vaping seems to be almost normalized or downplayed. People don't seem to be taking it seriously, especially the youth. I will be walking down the street one day, on a perfectly normal day, and look to my right to see someone I know casually pull out a vape, take a couple puffs, put it back in their bag like it's no big deal. And here's the issue, is that it is a big deal. They're completely unaware of the side effects or the harm that they could be doing to their bodies. And something else to add is that vapes are incredibly accessible to the youth. Any teen could get a hold of one, do as they please with it without being aware of the damage that they could be doing to themselves. For example, an easy way to get a hold of a vape pen is by using the Amazon Hub Locker. On the Amazon website, any teen can order an e-cigarette by checking a box that says that they're 18 and then ship that package to an Amazon locker, in which one so conveniently happens to be right at the Whole Foods in Napa. Once the package is delivered, the teen will be sent a 6-digit code on their phone to unlock their locker when it is convenient for them. So then the next time the parent and the teen go to shopping at Whole Foods, like any parent or teen would, they could easily sneak off to the locker, put in their code, open the locker, get their jewel, slip it into their shirt or jacket or whatever, and nothing would be suspected of them. This isn't acceptable at all. This really shouldn't have to be a reality, because this problem needs to end, and it needs to end now. And like Beatrice said, we alone cannot be expected to fix this problem. We need the adults' help, because something has to be done now, and we can't just wait around for the situation to fix itself. We need to snatch these deadly devices from the hands of the youth, and for the sake of the youth, get rid of vaping once and for all, especially here in the city of St. Helena. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for being here and speaking. Is there any further public comment? So with that, I'm going to close the public comment and bring it back to the council. Any initial thoughts from the council? Mr. Knudsen?
I really love the fact that we have public participation from our younger citizens, so thank you very much for coming. It's funny because I'm not a big proponent of sort of this, in general, trying to make money as a city from selling product. I mean, we have to decide what products that may have downsides are sellable in our town, right? So we allow alcohol, right? And we allow, so far we haven't allowed marijuana sales in town. We've allowed e-cigarettes, and we've done sort of nothing about them to date. But it's funny because at the state level, we've got a 21 and over requirement. And so I'm fascinated to understand, I know underage kids drink, I know underage kids smoke, and we've got a handful of retailers selling product. I'm sort of curious as to how the product is actually getting into the hands of folks that it shouldn't be in front of. I don't think there's an answer, because I would need to hang out at the high school and talk to some vapors and say, hey, who gave that to you? And they probably may not tell me, right? So it seems to me there are some other Berkeley, maybe following their model. It's tough for me to think about the entire ban of e-cigarettes, because I do think there are adults that are trying to wean themselves off of cigarettes, and who knows at all. And I'm also personally not in favor of banning menthol. I think, sort of given the profile of users, that might send a challenging message to the community. But if we follow the model like Berkeley, I think we'd be well within our purview, and it hopefully, if we can make it less appealing and attractive for kids to get flavored product, that could be helpful.
Ms. Koberstein, Mr. Doring?
I have a couple questions. I don't have answers. Clearly we could do things like ban the sale. What about possession? Do we have the ability to create any laws where somebody found to be possessing vaping products who is under age 21 could be? I see a nod in the back of the room. Maybe that's something we could consider. It's certainly not going to stop the world from vaping, but if we sort of became a, vaping free zone or something, might be something to look into. I do think we should really partner with the county. We obviously can't solve the whole problem in St. Helena, but whether it's financial contribution or whatever to the programs related to education and everything else, I think we should do that. So mostly I'm thinking about possession, and also when you and I, Mayor Ellsworth, met with these young women, they did talk about how people sell this stuff over and over again and resale among users because it has a value. And I'm wondering if it's something that the police departments could, I don't know, maybe institute a buyback program or something. They have programs to buy firearms from people. I just think if it would send another message of awareness about how dangerous this is if we dealt with issues beyond sale. So.
Well, I commend you young people for coming and speaking to us. Nothing that you told me actually was new to me, because I've been thinking about this issue for several years. I have now an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old who are very savvy about how to acquire different products in the world. Not that they use them themselves. I've always, the Amazon, I always thought that was a myth. Frankly, I was like, no way. You can go to the locker. So that's something we can't regulate here, right? But we can certainly regulate it at our, the local level to the extent we can. I would, we're here to get direction to our staff. We have we have a full menu here. One of the ones I would be totally in support of is banning the flavored tobacco sales wholesale. I think that that's something we can do in this community. I do think there are some people that use it for cessation purposes. So, you know, the going that far, probably not. I'm focusing on our youth, 21 and under, and trying to, you know, figure out other ways to reduce the use and educate young people that this is not a good idea over the long term. So I would, if there was some direction that you were looking for from Paul Doring, it would be to draft an ordinance that prohibits the sale of flavored tobacco products, and we would be, frankly, in the mainstream in the Napa Valley. I agree with Councilmember Knutson that, you know, I wouldn't go much further than that right now, but I also agree with Councilmember Koberstein that we really need to get more involvement with the county because of all the different issues, especially the enforcement issue. That's one concern that I have is how robust is our enforcement? How often do we send people to these different retail establishments, you know, with people who may be 22 or 23 and they maybe can pass for 16 and 17. We need to do, that's the old-fashioned thing that people have done, you know, and I don't know that works, but that's what I would be doing, and that would be more, it would be nice to have an overarching county ordinance as other counties do, and then have all of the different cities follow along so that we can work together on banning what we need to ban, enforce what we need to enforce. So that's kind of what I'm looking at here. We've already done some of these other things, you know, prohibited in public parks. I think we have pretty strong ordinances, but I do think we need to beef this up with respect to the flavored tobacco products. One of the things I haven't heard about, and maybe somebody has an answer, is there a negative consequence? Is there sort of contraband products out there? I don't know about that. So if you ban everything, then you have these even worse products that kind of float around the community. I don't know if anybody here can speak to that issue, but I worry about, because there are other models of that happening. You ban something and all of a sudden the contraband product even gets stronger in the community. I don't know if anyone can speak to that, but I'm concerned about that. It wouldn't prohibit me from wanting to pass this ordinance to ban them, but I want to know what the unintended consequences would be.
Thank you. I'm listening to everybody. I think I concur, certainly in terms of flavored tobacco products. I think we need to look at prohibiting them. I think Mr. Knudsen makes a case on the e-cigarettes that is also an adult product that may have some value to certain adults in terms of cessation. Leaning towards the prohibition of the flavored tobacco products, I think the buyback program, finding some model or creating some model, I think as Ms. Koberstein suggested, maybe this is something that we create an alternative for somebody that they otherwise wouldn't have. Ms. Monette brought up the idea of discussing with retailers what they're going to lose and finding a way to sort of incentivize them to step away. So that may be something we look at. If we're going to begin giving direction tonight for some action, that's where I'm at. I have a question on the prohibiting the sale of tobacco products in pharmacies. Is that because the tobacco product would be inconsistent with the more healthful items that are sold at a pharmacy?
Yes.
Okay. And currently in our town, are they available in pharmacies?
I believe the Safeway stores do they sell, is that a pharmacy as well?
No.
No. Okay. Then.
Okay. I just wanted the rationale on that.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay. So that's sort of where I'm at in terms of direction, and I think it's consistent with the rest of the council. I agree on the menthol issue as well, that might be a step too far at this point. Does that give you?
Can you provide just a little bit more clarification on the next steps and what we should bring back?
to me, it's a model ordinance
Okay.
that looks at other city, as we've looked at these other cities, so it could be fashioned off of one of those cities, but using this criteria sort of as a starting point, the flavored tobaccos.
So just flavored tobacco.
Yes, and then is there any way to put forward some motion in terms of looking at a buyback program or outreach to retailers who may be losing revenue, what we can do to incentivize them to not be interested in that kind of revenue?
We can evaluate and look at what other cities have done. I will tell you that in a prior city, on a different product, we did ask, in fact, it might have been this issue, but I know that we asked about, we had 6 retailers that sold some form of tobacco, and we asked whether they would voluntarily choose to not sell that. And there were retailers that did choose to stop selling the product. So another option is simply for us to explore that from a volunteer basis.
Okay.
Another potential option is to not have the ordinance go into effect for a certain amount of time to allow any retailers to clear their stocks of any inventory.
Okay.
I think the buyback is maybe an issue to ask our police department to look into. And I was seeing a nod in the back of the room about possession. I don't know if there is anything we can do about that, but I would like to be kind of informed by the police what they think about that kind of thing.
We can research that and bring that information back to you.
That'd be great. Very good. Does that give some clarity?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for speaking and participating. One day we hope you'll be back up here sitting where we are. Thank you. Yeah, give us a little bit of time. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on now. We're going to go back to item 10 points.
And Mayor, you may want to consider to 11.1 now, and
Okay.
then we go back to 10.1.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll look at 11.1, and this is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution appointing applicants to the Financing Civic Infrastructure Task Force. We'll give it a moment here for the room to clear. Okay. Okay, so here we are at 11.1, and this is prepared by Cindy Zhafopoulos, our city clerk.
Good evening. So at the January 17th, we had January 17th special city council meeting. We held a applicant interview meeting, and everyone was present. And so tonight we have before you an item for you to vote on who you shall appoint to the committee, and also to let us know if you would like a 5-member committee or a 7-member committee.
So that is the first discussion?
The first discussion is to let staff know if you would like to have a 5-member or a 7-member committee.
Now, is that something that we discuss here just at the council? We don't open that to public
You
comment?
would give us a direction.
Okay. Any initial thoughts on that?
To me, we've got a number of qualified applicants. I would like all of them, if we can, to be part of this. And to me, having 7 is not unwieldy, and why not?
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think they might actually be able to get more work done. You know, we talked about this group as possibly breaking into little groups that might study particular issues, and the more bodies, the more work and the more groups there could be. So, and I just don't see why we would arbitrarily eliminate 2 people. We had a lot of very well qualified applicants.
Agreed.
I concur as well. So we have...
So we have 7 applicants, and so we would appoint all 7 applicants, and no need to vote.
Very good. So that worked out well. Do we have further discussion?
I would like a motion, if
Oh,
you
do we
wouldn't
need-
mind, a motion to appoint the members to the committee.
Okay, we're going to need to open it to public comment. So I'm going to open it for public comment. Is there any public comment at this point? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back.
Do we need to discuss the chair appointment and that?
Yes, is there a
I can speak to that. Tomorrow, we've developed an agenda for the first meeting, which is Monday, February 3rd, for everyone's calendar, and we have developed an agenda that would include that discussion at that time in a joint meeting with the City Council and the task force.
So we can't talk about it now?
It's tonight's focus is the appointment of the members, but we are planning to agendize on February 3rd the appointment of the chair.
So we can't express any opinion about that tonight. Is that what you're telling me?
Let's hear from Zuida.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose if you have an opinion as to the process or that type of thing, you can go ahead and talk about it. But I think what City Manager is basically saying is that that item is going to be on the agenda for the joint consideration of the council and the task force.
Okay, well, I don't have a person, but I do have an opinion. I think that this group should appoint their own chair and vice chair, and we can ratify it. I think that was one of the options that was laid out in the resolution. They spent 2 hours together talking and, getting to know each other. I mean, we did appoint the chair of the SHAPE committee. That was a really unusual situation where we were interviewing people during the fire and they were never all even in the same room together. So I don't see why we wouldn't just let them go ahead and decide, like a jury would, who's the foreman, It's my view.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
At the dais, please.
Yes. I'll open the public comment. If you'll step up to the podium, please.
Now that you've sat through hours of meetings.
My name is Glenn Gels, and I was one of the 3 people that also attended that meeting just to be advisors to the task force, so not to participate in the task force itself, but to kind of advise the task force. I don't know if we're acceptable in terms of being advisors to it or where the 3 advisors stand. I just want to clarify where we're at on that.
Is there any input?
You're acceptable to me.
Okay. Well,
So-
the price is right because it's free, so.
I think we all consider you to be part of the process too.
Okay.
Right.
Just wanted to clarify.
All 3 of you.
Thank you, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for your application.
Okay. Yep.
Maybe you're going to do this anyway, but I was wondering if you'd read off the names of the people on the committee. For those of us who don't
okay.
know. Or is that going to happen anyway? Or
We can do that, I
Yeah,
believe.
maybe
Yes.
not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? I will close the public comment. And do we have a list of the names of those who are appointed?
We sure do. Philippa Ward, Tom McBroom, Daniel Hill, George David, Patrick Keneally, Elaine Honig, and Richard Wallach. And the 3 subject matter experts, Glenn Gels, Thomas Allen, and Dale Grossman.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Is there anything further on this?
I need a motion to adopt a resolution appointing the members to the task force.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, with that, I'll thank everybody, and we'll look forward to everybody working together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your participation. So now we're going to move back to item 10.1, and this is the Downtown Streetscape Construction Project update, and this will be Priya Nixon.
And Mark Prestwich is going to assist as well.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mayor. While the PowerPoint is coming up, just a little background. We last visited you on June 11th last year, and at that time we shared with the City Council the design concepts, and at that time the Council directed staff to continue to progress with detailed design and refine the cost estimates. So that included a lot of engineering. At the same time, the public outreach and engagement efforts that preceded that discussion and continued, frankly, after that, included a number of conversations with the business community. And there was consistent feedback, which I'll share also through the PowerPoint, but the consistent feedback from the business community anticipating the project and understandably concerned about business impacts was please minimize the project duration. Ensure that the businesses continue to have access during construction. Please avoid construction during the high pedestrian season. And we're just essentially defining that as summer and harvest season through the fall. And of course, this project needs to avoid rain a little bit, so we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. And additionally, please provide and consider setting up temporary parking and signage so visitors have an opportunity to know where to park and how to access businesses during the construction period. And consider ways to reduce mobilization time, which has a contributing factor to the project duration. So with all of that in mind and numerous conversations with our engineering team, we've developed a strategy that reacts to all of those requests. And tonight, we're going to provide you an update on the project costs, talk to you about the thinking that has been developed related to how to phase this project, partly because of money considerations, but also partly because of Caltrans permitting requirement realities. We have an estimate that now projects a cost that exceeds the grant, and so we have a $2.4 million challenge in solving, and we are going to provide you some thinking on how to resolve that tonight and receive your feedback on that, and then walk you through a little bit of the project. So if you skip to the next, actually go back to the first one just briefly. So here's what we'll talk about. We'll just walk through the scope. There are 3 phases to the project as we've designed this. Phase 1 is essentially sidewalks. And I'm certain I'm not
sorry,
out of time.
Mr. Presswich.
Phase 1 is essentially sidewalks. Phase 2 includes bulb outs. Phase 3 would be extending the project to the adjacent streets such as Oak and Railroad. We're going to also talk to you about a preliminary business continuity plan. This is intended to raise awareness of the challenges that our businesses face during that time and receive your reaction to some of those ideas. And then we want to answer any questions you have. So with that, we're going to start with a reminder and overview of the project by Linda Gates with Gates & Associates.
I'm going to keep this brief because many of you have seen these slides many times before, but I always think when you start to discuss something, it's good to sort of start with where did we come from, where have we gone. So about a year ago, we decided to look at based on the grant, look at improvements on Main Street. But before we looked at the improvements, we wanted to look at sort of the whole downtown. So anything we looked at, we would be planning for the future. So we looked at the whole green area in order to design the yellow line at this point in time. And somebody likened it to the kitchen, and you design the kitchen in order to select your kitchen sink. So we went through a process of designing that. Next slide. And in that process, there was a steering committee appointed that helped us out, that were ambassadors to the downtown. There were some stakeholders that were not able to participate in the steering committee, but we had conducted interviews with them. We held some separate meetings with the business community to hear some of their concerns about construction staging. We held a pop-up on Main Street in one of the retail shops here. We went to the farmers market. We had online surveys, because basically this plan wanted to be the vision of the community. And so I think that we then, next slide, came up with a vision, and sort of some of the overarching things we heard from that is they really wanted to enhance the pedestrian experience going down the street, sort of less about the cars driving down the street and more about how the people who shop experience the street. We wanted to make sure and expand that sort of pedestrian core out to City Hall and down to the bridge, so that it didn't just stop at Adam and Spring, but the whole street became part of the downtown. And that we sort of created a unifying sense of place, a sort of identity for St. Helena that reflected the art, historic, and agrarian references. So those are sort of the overarching goals of that outreach. And so we're here tonight to talk to you about this first phase, which is phase 1, which are the sort of sidewalk improvements to the project.
Next, Dan Schaefer with BKF will walk us through the thinking from a construction standpoint on how to minimize business impacts.
Yeah, so when we were looking at phase one and at the sidewalk aspects of it, what we really wanted to do is make sure we leveraged the grant funding. That was the most critical piece. And the purpose for the grant funding is to replace the sidewalks that are buckled due to the tree roots, the curbs that are buckled as well. And in order to do that, what we really needed to do is look at, well, how are we going to actually build the project? And so we came up with a scheme of, well, let's sub-phase the project into 3 separate, basically blocks. They're a little bit not quite blocks because the streets aren't quite gridded, but basically 3 different phases. And those are shown up as phase 1A, 1B, and 1C. Now, these phases could be, you could build north to south or south to north. That doesn't really matter yet. Well, but what we're looking at is really how do we get the duration down, right? Because the duration is the key in doing these streetscape projects, in doing downtown areas. That's the key to minimizing impacts to businesses, is to make sure that the doors in front of the businesses are open at all times, and to minimize the work in front of their business. And so in order to break it down into 3 different phases, what we've thought about is, okay, how then can we, in each one of those phases, what do we do? Right. First of all, we would make sure we kept the existing sidewalk right against the business while we replace the curb and remove the trees in that area, and then put a temporary sidewalk, if you will, down where the curb is, and let that be used for the pedestrians to walk to get to the businesses while you're replacing the sidewalk right next to the businesses. So that kind of sequencing goes into a schedule. And if you'll go to the next slide. So what we've tried to do is really look at how do we expedite construction. The 3 things that we think we can do are, 1 is if we do the work at night, that lessens the impacts to the businesses during the day. Keep the streets open, keep the sidewalks open during the day. 2nd is anticipate a 7-day work week. And then 3rd, the sub-phasing that I talked about. And in doing this, what we think we can do is minimize the disturbance in front of the businesses for each one of those blocks or each one of those subphases to about 30 working days. And in order to do that, what we want to do is in January is actually take the trees down that are out there now, and then Linda can talk a little bit more about why we need to do that, but that'll set us up so that when the construction starts going, they can just do the improvements that we need to do, which are the sidewalk, electrical system to supply lights, some sewer repairs, and curb and gutter replacement.
In the interest of transparency, we are removing the trees in the area where we're doing the streetscape improvements. We're doing utilities, we're pulling out things with underground work. It's impossible to save them, but also when we replant trees, we get to use the best practices that we understand now with proper irrigation, deep root barriers, proper soil amendments, so we can drive the roots down into an area where they're not conflicting with sidewalks and all those kind of utilities. So basically, the tree roots and their buckling of the pavement are one of the major impetus for this project, and we're making the investment in the future to do this right. So this project will primarily consist of, concrete, different patterns of concrete. We're using it to depict the area right outside the stores where merchants might set up display or tables or pots and stuff like that, keeping a clear zone for people to walk through, and then also having an area where you have benches and side amenities and such like that. And the tree we're using to replace the trees is the Trident maple. Actually, it was part of a street tree list of potential trees for the street. It was developed a number of years ago by the city. It is a really good tree in urban situations. It gives a seasonal color. The other thing that's nice about it is has this pyramidal form, so it grows up without conflicting with the buildings as much. So I think it, yes, there'll be a shock when we first do this, but the ultimate, we're making an investment in our future here. And for the next slide, I just want to demonstrate this investment. So as you can see, we have the sort of pavers that are there now, a mixture of different kind of site furniture, kind of buckling paving and stuff. And at the end of Phase 1, we hope to have a clean sidewalk that people can comfortably walk down and be window shopping, not watching where they're going to trip. You'll have organized, nice site furniture and such. So, and then, you know, this is showing the tree growth after about 7 years. We will maybe, for the primarily keeping a lot of trees where they are, but we may be adjusting some of the locations. We want to work with the architecture. We want to work with the utilities. We want to work with how people enter and exit their cars. It's all very carefully crafted. And next slide, I think, is you, Mark. So you're going to keep the businesses in business while we do this.
Thank you. So we're going to talk first a little bit about the business continuity plan, and then get into some of the numbers. And we also have April Mitz, our finance director, on the phone with addition, and she's available for any additional questions we have. So in terms of the business continuity plan, this is a sketch of ideas that we're interested in your reaction to. And we held a meeting and invited our downtown business merchants to this meeting a couple of weeks ago just to get reaction. And no negative reaction at all to any of the ideas. And in terms of this first one, our interest was to also convene a retail merchants working group and invite the members of our business community to assist in developing some form of a let's go out to shop and eat campaign. And the inspiration for this was really a community affected by the PSPS events, where their campaign was let's go out to eat. We think that should be shop and eat. All of our businesses downtown during this campaign. So there are a number of creative ideas I know that we can bring forward with the help of our business community, and the idea is to work together on developing messaging, ideas, strategies to encourage our residents to shop more often than they usually do during the project period of time. So this is about a 3-month project in front of each of these, total. With the 3 phases in the downtown. We anticipate the project would begin in the March-April timeframe and run about 3 months. In terms of a facade improvement program, this is an idea that's in the council adopted economic strategy for St. Helena. This requires us to develop a policy in advance, but the concept of a facade improvement program is if we're experiencing a little dust in downtown, there may be businesses that also have an interest in improving their facade at similar times. And so programs like this can provide some funding for businesses to address the exterior of their business or the interior of the business. That's a policy decision of the council, and we would need to define the parameters of that program. But there are a lot of good ideas and programs out there that we can replicate, and we would anticipate initiating development of that program sometime in a couple of months, should the council have interest in that. We know enhancing parking and signage is of interest from our business community. We have a number of ideas, and we have a number of private parking lots that we can approach the owners of those parking lots and talk to them about use of those parking lots during the construction period, and then develop signage that would assist visitors in finding those parking lots. Late last year, we introduced a ticket forgiveness program during the holidays, where there was essentially a warning issued for a first-time violator of time limits in a particular area. Our thinking is that we should extend that program through the duration of this project during the construction phase of this project, so that our visitors have a warning before a formal citation would be issued, and we have records on who's been given that warning. That's easy for us to document. The next bullet point relates to a concept of some form of a business license waiver or reduction program that would be in place. Let's say this is a concept, so the council could, for example, identify some form of businesses, a certain number of employees or less, and I'm thinking retail businesses, so businesses that sell retail with a certain number of employees or less, so draw the line wherever you would like. The concept would be some form of a reduction or a waiver for the year, the calendar year during which that project would occur. So let me stop there and answer any questions you have about the business continuity plan, and then we'll move into some numbers.
I have a question. I also have a question on trees and cost, but we can do those later at the appropriate time. In terms of business continuity, is there a plan to work with the hotels in town as well, not just the locals?
Yes, and I think that and there are also impacts we know with a couple of hotels downtown, and restaurants. So if we're doing night work, for example, there's going to need to be some specific coordination around those buildings, and working with those buildings to alert them of the timing of that, and working maybe a little earlier on certain nights or a little later to adjust around those various businesses, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel, or a movie theater, right? So there are some nuances with how we might perform the work at night. And I may not be answering your question specifically. You may be thinking of other incentives.
Well, you talked about incentives for locals, whereas I think in a way it's more incentives for, the hospitality industry. I mean, there's only so many locals, right? And I know all the locals I know, I mean, they eat downtown, they shop downtown, so let's get some of the other folks who might not be thinking that way to think like, hey, there's a reason to actually go into town instead of not.
Right. I think that when we think about a let's go out to shop and eat campaign, that really is local and visitors. But we know that with people here 7 days a week, filling up businesses a little more often than we typically might go out to eat is one strategy. Weekends and holidays, we'll want to do our best at finding ways to encourage visitors to continue to visit downtown during the project. And we want to reach out, and we've started a list of volunteer businesses that want to participate in developing that strategy.
I think the challenge for night work also with the hotels that are impacted is, those are older buildings, and the windows may not be, those guys would be forced to have a lot of noise. That's concerning.
We think the Public Works Director and I talked a little bit today about Wydown, for example. That's a little bit off of the main street, and that may be a location, for example, that could start earlier, or even be a day. That particular phase of the project might be something that we could do during the day, or at least on one side of the street. The challenge is the more we try to work around the businesses, the easiest thing, the most effective way at moving this project forward is to close the street and do it all at once, and do it 24 hours a day. We think that that's inconsistent with the feedback that we've received, and the way we would design this project from a construction standpoint is move down the street on both sides at the same time rather than try to work with both sides. And so we think that accelerates it and cuts time off the project. But there will be disruption, which is why this program is intended to help mitigate the impacts.
And when would that program sort of be getting off the ground?
Well, we're going to want to start now. So we're going to have a second business outreach meeting in February.
On the 20th?
On the 20th of February, that will be a lunch meeting, and I think we're coordinating with a restaurant or a caterer, and we're working with the Cameo, and we'll be inviting the downtown businesses to, again, learn more about the timing of the program. We're going to continue to reach out and then get started with convening the businesses together and working with us to develop this campaign.
Any additional?
I'm wondering about the facade improvement program. I mean, so often that's a matter of the particular business planning to do it or the property owner allowing it. And I wouldn't want to spend a lot of effort developing it without actually going out there and seeing how many people are interested in doing it, or if they're even interested in doing it while this other stuff is going on. It may be work that comes later or something, and it might not be worth the effort. I would check to see who's out there who's actually interested. On the license reduction, I don't know how much money we're talking about, but I suppose any kind of waiver helps, particularly people who are experiencing some drop in retail business and sales and whatever. So I don't have an issue with that. I do think we really have to let the community know over and over again that this is coming. Maybe by using our Shine newsletter, which now comes out more frequently. We certainly tried to tell people we were going to go to bi-monthly utility billing and, kind of made that point. And I think we should take advantage of the Shine, whatever you call that thing, newsletter, to let people know what's coming in phase 1 and exactly what we're getting, and what's in phase 2 and what's in phase 3. I can see people saying, "Oh, where's the wayfinding signage?" Or, we put up all these little stickers and we thought we were getting this. I think it has to be really clear to people what's in phase 1, what's in phase 2, and what's in phase 3.
Mr. Dory?
Well, I just know that I know that the members of the ATSC had a number of different comments, and there's an attachment to the report. I attended that meeting, a variety of different opinions, and I was in my liaison role. I tried to sort of balance, some of the constraints that we have in terms of timing and funding. But some of the ideas I think are worth exploring, and maybe there are folks in the audience who talk about, parklets, green concrete. If not now, then at some point, some have commented, you may have received letters regarding the trees, and maybe, so we have to balance. My response back was, it's a financial issue. It's easier to take out all the trees, so we have to. I know you may have comments on that in terms of how we approach the tree issue, but it is a concern for many, to just pull out all the trees. I mean, it's the best. And from a construction point of view, I see the advantages of it, but Councilmember Knudsen probably has more thoughts on that. And then I'd like to have you open it up to maybe get more comments from the community on that issue or others.
It's funny. I have a really specific comment about the trees, and one of the members of the Parks and Rec Commission and several other folks who are arborists or have landscape experience, the original trees that are on Main Street, that are planted on Main Street, are inappropriate for next to sidewalks because they have root stock which is right next to the surface. And so they're lovely trees. They're not in the right place. And I'm hoping, that was the question I was going to ask, is that these trident maples, aside from the effort the above where the canopy goes up rather than goes out, that also means that the roots are going down instead of going out. And so I think people tell me, I wish we could save the trees. The problem with the trees is they're the wrong trees. And that's why we have so many issues with our sidewalks. And I'm hoping that perhaps on the newspaper, that's something that we could really communicate, because people are like, "Oh, you're cutting the trees." Well, there's a reason for that, because they weren't the right trees.
Is that, just to explore that further, is that the case with the newer trees that have been replanted recently? You would think that if we had the wrong trees 25 years ago or 30 years ago, that the newer trees would not be the, quote, wrong trees. I'm sure that there are folks in the audience who can speak to that. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either. I wish we could bring the couple of experts that I talked to here to council to share, but we've got very smart people in the audience that may know the answer.
Well, I'm going to make one comment and then open up to public.
And let me finish with the remaining slides too after your comments.
So, one thing I'm interested in as we do this project is looking at how we do our pedestrian crossing and bicycle crossing. Is that a component as we look at this first phase that we can upgrade some of our Main Street crossings?
Is the question about bulb outs?
Not
Or
necessarily bulb outs, but
just some form of additional
more visibility or safety measures so that
I think at the minimum we need to use to get the striping, pavement markings updated. That they should be a continental crosswalk. Right now they're just the regular basic crosswalk. They're not the high visibility ladders that are called Continental Crosswalk. I think the signage should be updated. If we could add the addition of the rapid reflective beacons at the non-signalized intersections, that'd be great. But those are approximately $50,000 per location. There's 3 locations: Spring Street, Hunt, and Pine Street. But then they could potentially add congestion. But I think those would be additions especially at the Pine Street location where it's further away from the signals, would be an added addition where there's blind areas to traffic.
So if it...
Mr. Mayor, please
yes.
speak into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. So if it could be considered, it's a budgeting issue, but it's something that could be considered to be implemented at the same time as the sidewalk?
Correct. The ramps would be upgraded. That would absolutely have to do the ADA upgrades with all the curb ramps. But I think the improved signage should be added. And if we could add the lighted component, the solar lights, and either add it as an add-on or see where our budget comes in and get those added in the budget at the time.
So do you want to comment before?
I just wanted to follow on that. I know the manager wants to finish, but what about the material of the crosswalk itself? Is that going to be included in phase 1, the actual, maybe a different kind of material to sort of highlight the crosswalk itself, or is that some
That's
future...
a considered expense also because it's Caltrans. That's a significant expense because it is Caltrans
I
right
assume
away.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the striping we could definitely get added.
So I mentioned earlier that with the refined cost estimates, and there is an attachment in the staff report, I believe it's on page 10 of the staff report, and it outlines the costs that break down by phase. The total project cost from start to finish on all 3 phases is currently estimated at $15 million. Phase 1 is estimated at $3.6 million. We have a $1.2 million grant. That leaves a shortfall of $2.4 million. Phase 2 with the bulb outs is an additional $3.1 million. And phase 3 would be an additional $8.4 million. This is curb gutter sidewalk type improvements and in the alleyways between Main Street and Oak and Main Street and Railroad. So focusing on phase 1, this is an example of how we would recommend approaching this. So Measure T revenues, the half-cent 25-year sales tax, is the source of funding for the project that complements the grant funding. And the grant funding has a timing issue with it, which is why we're focused on delivering the project in 2021. Delaying that project compromises the grant. So the way we've structured this is the project is likely to cross fiscal years as it wraps up in between 2020 and the fiscal year 2020 and the fiscal year 2021. So if assuming we start construction in January and with the tree removal, and there are issues with the tree removal needs to happen in January because of bird habitat, what that also does is remove the complexity of the routes that would otherwise slow down the project, and that would not be a 30-day project if we are trying to work around trees. The plan would be to close that $2.4 million gap, use $500,000 of the approximate $1 million that the city receives in those 2 years. So half of the resources in each year would be dedicated exclusively to this project. We would propose borrowing from the general fund $1.4 million and then repaying the general fund from Measure T over a period of, my recommendation is a minimum of 5 years. So we've approached it with a minimum of 5 here. The idea being that the more we continue to maintain and invest in our streets now, the longer they will last. So the real point here is this approach would allow us to use about 80% of the Measure T revenues and local match to continue to investment in our streets and the maintenance associated with that, while also allowing this project to move forward. So we're interested in your reaction to this approach from a funding standpoint. This information is also very helpful for the task force as they think about the challenges that come with buildings, storm drains, and delivering streetscape improvements.
I think the funding plan is lovely, and I actually like breaking down the project into different components. as I've looked at this more closely, I'd be interested in the other council members' thoughts, but it strikes me, I hate to redo work, and so I love the bulb outs aspect of what's coming in phase 2. I think it's going to really enhance the intimacy of our streets. I'm a huge proponent of the additional sidewalk crossing in front of the Cameo. I think the more we can make our town a pedestrian-friendly town, the better off that we all are. I wonder if, from a cost perspective, we could not touch the areas in this first phase where we will do the bulb outs, therefore not having to tear up work that we just did, which drives me crazy as well. But I'm curious as to others' thoughts.
My thought is to open it up to public comment and then come back to discussion. Is that, unless you have...
Yeah, and I actually think, the engineer can probably answer that question as to the timing of the bulb outs related to the rest of the work.
Okay. So I'll open the public comment, and if we could get a thought on that, and then public comment will be open. So if you'd like to come up and...
Sure. There's a couple reasons why the bulb outs were pushed to phase 2. And essentially the biggest reason is because of Caltrans' own process. So the grant funding is it goes through Caltrans, but it's a different division in Caltrans than that of the bulb outs. Since the bulb outs are not standard Caltrans practice, they actually have to go to Sacramento to get approved. So we would jeopardize the funding of the grant by going through a year-long process with Caltrans to try to get the bulb outs approved. And so what we're trying to do with the replacement now is the ADA, the accessible ramps now are not ADA compliant. So if we don't fix those, you theoretically are open as a liability, right? So in my opinion, is if you are doing sidewalk improvements, those I would want to fix now, even if I would have to come back in a few years and rip them out. And that's the areas where these bulb outs are, is where the crossings are. And so my recommendation would be is you should put those back to replace them to meet the current standards, because that standard is always changing, but at least now you're compliant.
Isn't there also one more issue, that they tend to be located in areas where people are not parking now, so to come back later and do the bulb outs is not so disruptive to the business?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there public comment, additional public comment at this point? Yes, please.
Rich Waller, question for the task force. This is a great example. Hopefully and I assume your staff will be here with our meeting on Monday. If we could use this as an example of one component of the forecast that we're going to make on cash flow, because there is an $8 million item at the end that I don't know exactly how we're going to pay for that. So this would be a great example for us to use as a component of the work that we're going to do. Don't need an answer tonight, but I would like to have it ready for Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They're already pushing you, Mark.
Is there additional public comment?
Hello. Excuse me, Suzanne Ortega. There's a lot of, I guess, experts here that know about the engineering and this development of the project. So I'm basically just a local who does use the downtown area and enjoy it. I'm there often, and I have a business here in town, not on Main Street, therefore this kind of thing wouldn't affect me by stopping doing the construction. But being a local, living here and working here for probably 30 years, the trees have been part of an essential part of the pleasure of being downtown, along with the I guess, the scenic view of the historic buildings and the restaurants and some of the shops that are kind of useful, like Steve's Hardware and the pharmacy, and which we tend to use that often. So I guess I want to make a plea for the trees. I know it sounds kind of maybe a minor thing because the construction and the engineering is so precise and timing and money. But I think people are going to have an emotional reaction to taking this entire three blocks, I guess, or 4 blocks, the entire downtown area, and wipe it clean, and then start with the construction for, it sounds like it will be going on until from January to, excuse me, the beginning of summer maybe. And then you wouldn't be able to plant trees until, I think Erica said, into the fall, because they would be more successful then. I don't know exactly the details of the planting and the size, but it's going to affect people, and I think the idea of giving the locals, in addition to the people who own businesses, the information ahead of time in detail, maybe in the Shrine, or what do you call it? The Shine newsletter, would help us get adjusted to this plan. I know I'm going to miss the trees. I know the Raywoods have been scheduled to be taken out for years by the city arborists and Public Works, and they worked on a staging process so that you would have some big ones and some new trees over the last 10 years that I've been partially on the 6 years on the tree committee. But I also would like to say that maybe keeping some of the younger trees that were planted in the last 10 years, I already know the objection to that, in addition to the new trees, would help with the acceptance of this plan. And some of the new trees, like in front of Wind Down or the plaza down at the south end of town, are new trees, are healthy trees, and their sidewalks do not look like they need to be completely redone, but they could be redone and still have their methods to save trees' roots, especially if they're young. But anyway, that's my plea, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the comment and bring it back to the council. And
Mr. Mayor?
yes.
Could I get a motion to move beyond 9 p.m.?
Is there a
move we
motion?
extend till 9:30 because we still have a couple other items.
Does that require unanimous
No,
consent?
majority.
Oh, okay.
Is there a second?
The next one does, though, right?
Yes.
Second.
Councilmember Koberstein? Vice Mayor Dory?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yeah.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. So the recommendation, is there additional comment at this point? The recommendation is to review and discuss approved plan related to the project funding and provide direction to the city manager related to preliminary business continuity plan. Is there any additional thought?
I just hope we're going to let this new task force take a look at this funding too, and taking the Measure T money off of the streets. I think I would like to know, and the public ought to know, what streets are not going to be paved or fixed by using this money. And it's a big calculus. I mean, maybe it's one big loan from the general fund so we can keep paving streets, but I think that's what we're going to have all these financial experts help us with.
So I think that's a good point. And having this task force formed at this time is an excellent tool. Is there additional direction that you feel like you need at this point?
I think just an overview of next steps. So the next steps are that we will be submitting for a Caltrans encroachment permit, completing environmental, and then submitting for the Caltrans encroachment permit. The anticipated submittal date would be in the next couple of months, with the idea of getting Caltrans permitting by late fall, so that we can go to advertise and get bids so that we could begin the project and have a contractor on board by early 2021. The idea would be to have a separate contract for the tree removal that would happen literally after the 1st of January, probably the second week in January, beginning next year, where we would take those out. We would put back the street so it would look very similar to the way it does today. The pavers would go back and be placed in areas where the trees were, so that it would be walkable. And then the project would begin in the March-April timeframe, depending on weather.
And when do the trees go back? I mean, when are the trees replanted later?
There will be irrigation, but typically it's either spring or fall when you plant trees to make them more successful. I don't know if our landscape
So like
architect...
April, May is not considered spring?
Well, that would be in the middle of the concrete at that point in time. We'll be pouring concrete and sidewalks probably for those 3 solid months. So, I mean, I don't know if our landscape architect wants to comment on that, since we will have irrigation.
No, I just wanted to understand. The trees would come back in the fall, is what you're saying.
After the concrete's done, yes.
Most likely.
No, I'm seeing a number.
Is there Mr. Gates, would you like to come up and...
Sorry, Dave Gates. The trees will go in before the concrete is paved. So if it's a 3-month process, excuse me, they'll probably go in May. We can't put them in after you've basically done the concrete. So they won't be gone that long.
Very good.
Well, that sounds different than everything we've all been told.
We'll take that.
And then looking too at types of concrete, types of cement, are there options that are greener that we can look at?
As far as green concrete?
Yeah.
So using the recycled materials is not new to road construction or concrete construction. So if we have facilities that are local that are already using recycled materials, usually depending on the specifications we require, that's new materials. So we'll determine on what the local mixes are. On a project this size, it may not be conducive to use recycled materials. They may not be available. So it could be driving up costs. So that's one thing that we'll have to provide analysis on. I checked with BKF on that, and they confirmed what I'm telling you this evening.
Okay, and if it is an option, is it an attractive option in terms of aesthetics, using recycled? Is it something people can't tell, or they can tell? Or?
They can't tell.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts at this point?
Are we going to have a further discussion or not?
Certainly, if you have some points.
Well, one is I'd like confirmation on the, if we could, at a later time, about the fact that the trees could come in. There could be a gap of only a couple of months between the tree removal and the tree placement. It's hard to have construction around trees. I'm not a roads guy, so I don't really know. But it'd be interesting to know that. And also, I thought the speaker brought up really good points about how we've replaced some trees, and I also understand you can't, you have to do demo, and it makes it much quicker. But I don't know if we have an inventory. I mean, if those trees were the same trees as the trees that are in there, then they're going to have the same root problem at some point. If they're not, then is there a way that we could save some, or is it just basically, are we committing ourselves to some crazy number and interruption? It'd be nice to have an understanding of that, because I don't know the average age or the age of individual trees or whatnot. And
The feedback that the engineering team has given us is removal of the trees accelerates the project. Leaving the trees in place slows down the project and could be substantial. We do anticipate, even I assume with young trees with older pipes in the ground, there could be conflicts between the existing pipes and the younger trees. And the advantage of getting in January and taking them out removes the conflicts that would occur with the pipes under the ground. And I think it's fair to say, I think we need to have more conversation about the trees itself. Is it going to be that single tree or a combination of trees? So I think there's some additional outreach and council conversation that we will have on that. And with respect to concrete, I think we can bring you an update a little bit later with the refinement of concrete options so that you see those and understand exactly what that looks like. And if and there may be there may be a need and value in having the council look at a couple of options that narrow the focus on, for example, the scoring. But I think we're at 24 inches on center now on the scoring.
Oh, yes. Yes, if you'd like to come up to the podium. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so multiple things like the young trees. I don't know what was exactly planted, the detail they used to plant them, how the irrigation system was set up to that. So I can't comment on that. But I do know that when we leave, we want to make sure it's an ideal scenario. And so we can look at that. But my feeling is it's probably better to just replant them in exactly the right way so I can feel really comfortable that we won't be talking about this in 10 years with problems. Yes, we are looking at a scoring pattern like a 2x2 that's kind of like you see in some of the old historic neighbors. The sidewalks are sort of more in a smaller grid than this 5x5, and sort of different. It's a concrete but different kind of treatments to make it feel more authentic with the kinds of architecture that you have. Is that all the little questions that were there? Okay.
Mr. Gates, did you have a?
Let me just underscore a little bit because it's really it's an easy decision. So if you're going to take out your curb and gutter, you're going to come in with equipment and you're going to demo it, and there's a sub base under the curb, so you're probably going to cut a ditch probably up to almost 30 inches, probably within 24 inches of the tree. That's on the street side. The other side, where you know the roots are shallow, 80% of the root hairs are in the top 24 inches for those trees. So when you take out all those pavers and put in a sub base for the concrete, you're down another 24 inches. Then you're going to run an irrigation line, your electrical lines and other lines parallel. So you've got a root ball that's doing this. You've just cut it on both sides. You cut it down and you've lancelated along it for all your utilities. Those trees, if you got another 2 years out of them, and we tried to leave them and spent all the time keeping the contractor away from them, and they die on us, we'll be run out of town. So it's very, very difficult to save them, especially with, notice what they're doing now. The roots are right on the surface. So also the pear trees, which you have probably 30%, have fire blight. You know, they will be dead within 3 to 5 years just because of the disease that's in them. And you have also a lot of other trees, the ash tree, which is also prone to disease. So it's really very difficult to try and save the trees. Costs us a lot of time, costs us a lot of money, and horticulturally it's just practically impossible. So for us, it's a very easy, it's emotional. We will get pounded for losing them. We just have to do it. We'll be thankful for the next 40 years that we did it. And when the new ones go in with the right roots and the right irrigation and the right soil, you won't have this problem again.
Thank you.
So, easy decision for us.
Thank you.
Can I ask one follow-up question? Yes. I assume we're planting like the optimum size tree that would start to grow, or are we planting something smaller because of the budget? Basically, like, could we upgrade the tree to something that's slightly bigger caliper, or are we already going for what is optimum?
There's sort of a point of diminishing returns. I'm sure you've heard, like, we don't want to put a 15-gallon in because it can snap in a minute. But also, every time you move a tree up box to box, you kind of prune it up. So there's a sort of point where, yes, we'll put in really large box, like one specimen, but it's like diminishing returns, and sort of in, 3 to 5 years, a smaller tree will catch up with a big tree. That said, we are looking at going in with good sized box so that it'll be of a reasonable caliber. These will not look like, huge trees, but we're sort of walking that fine line between what's reasonable to put in an urban environment where we can expect good growth. So yeah, I feel like, and I don't feel like putting in 40-inch box trees or something like there would actually serve you best in the long run. It's harder to get them to acclimate to the new setting. And so, yeah.
So we're putting in the optimum size.
The optimum size, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we could have a tree removal event or party or funeral or something.
Well, so do you feel like you have where we are tonight on this direction from us?
I have one. I really respect the consultant and his thoughts. I would like to have an open discussion, further discussion about the curbs and trying to not redo work, particularly because if you don't touch them, then you're not having to sort of redo ADA, right? Because it doesn't have to be modern, because it was modern at the time it was done. So
I think we can provide you information about the analysis of the corners that we see there. I don't know if, for example, at Hunt, if that would need to be touched because Caltrans just touched it. Question, but I think that's an example of something that we can follow up on.
I think it'd be great.
Okay.
And the other aspect is the scary intersections for someone who bikes and walks around town all the time. The scary intersections are the ones that are, as cars accelerate out of town, the Madrona, Fulton, that's completely frightening. I never have trouble crossing from the station to the bicycle. People stop, and I wave at them, and it's completely, people stop at Hunt. It's really the acceleration out of town, and those are the scary things. So I feel that we may need less assistance for those intermediate crosswalks that we may have in town that are between our lights. I'm less concerned about those than I am about the one that's down by Charter Oak and the one and the light actually at Madrona. That's completely frightening.
Final comment. I would just ask whoever's estimating that construction management cost of $300,000 to maybe justify that. It's $100,000 a month, basically, for construction management. I know construction management is expensive, but I would like to figure out a way to drive that down. Who gave that estimate, by the way?
Actually, it's low. Caltrans allows up to 15% for construction engineering, so that was being kind of conservative on the front, because it's not just going to be 3 months. You got the startup period once we get awarded contract, and then going through to completion. So, and maybe it's less. That'd be great.
Yep. Thanks.
Any additional comments? So with that, you have direction?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on. The next two items are, thank you very, very much for being here and presenting. Thank you. The next two items are there's a time sensitivity. We need to get to them tonight. So I'm going to bring up now item, let's see where we are here, sorry.
This is the RENA allocation 11.2.
11.2. This is 11.2, City Council consideration of a resolution authorizing the city to become a member of a sub-regional entity to administer the regional housing needs allocation, that's RHNA, R-H-N-A, process for the 2022 to 2030 cycle. And this is Mr. Heacock, and I will have our Mr. DeRosa.
And Mayor, I'll just jump in on this real quick.
Okay.
So this is really a straightforward question. With the exception of the city of Calistoga, the county and the other municipalities in Napa County are anticipating working together and collaborating on an approach that would allow us to work together to allocate the RENA numbers that arrive in the coming year. The city has an opportunity to opt out at any point before the submittal to ABAG would occur, before that locks us in. If we don't collaborate, we own the numbers that were provided. The cost to participate is approximately $10,000. That's our proportionate cost. And so our recommendation is that we explore that with the other agencies. We'll receive numbers. We'll have opportunities to talk a little bit about that later as this process materializes. There is a possibility, for example, that we have projects that come forward. We have numbers that look favorable to St. Helena. We have projects that produce numbers that we feel are achievable. That's essentially the reason why the city of Calistoga is not opting in. I believe that they feel they have projects coming that are going to deal with their numbers. But if we were in that same situation, there may be an advantage to the city where we could work with the county that may need credits, for example, and we would have credits and be able to work out some arrangement for the value of that unit or the units that might be in play. So that's the question before you tonight, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
And my understanding is, as you say, there's a sort of off-ramps if we're not happy before it goes to ABAG.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any initial council comment or question?
You know, I'm not sure I understand what the benefit to us is going to be for this. If we would actually start building some housing, which I think we're talking about numbers that are going to show up in 2023, is that right? And, you know, we're working on revising the zoning ordinance now. There's some properties that might be in play. It's, unless I'm misunderstanding this, I feel like we may end up taking more than our share, because where can the county put housing except for farm worker housing? And so I'm not sure I want to go there. And maybe I'm an isolationist, but it's kind of the way I think of it.
Mr. Doring?
Frankly, there's just not enough information to make a decision. I would hesitate to make a decision based on this staff report and this timeline. The best process would have been to have somebody from the county send us a letter and then come here and tell us what is this process about, how is it generated, how is it benefiting both parties, and then you work on it. It seems like it's rushed, has to be done in February. And then I had a question. You keep saying we are able to opt out, but under item 4, under the summary of steps for completing the RENA process, it says a jurisdiction cannot opt out of a subregion after the draft methodology is sent to HCD. So I'm maybe there's a clarification needed there.
The opt-out occurs before. So
before. Right.
Yeah, that's in December of this year is when that methodology is due.
Okay. So that's the last off-ramp, as the mayor stated. But there's just not enough information here. I just don't see. I mean, it would be nice to have information about what are there other subregions in California? How is that working out? Some models. I don't know. I just don't have enough information to make a decision, and so that's where I'll stay.
Mr. Knudsen? So I guess where I'm at is that if it opens a discussion with the county on housing, which I think it's well past time to have that conversation. We have an ag preserve that created a unique situation here 50 years ago, and we have current issues because it's such a unique situation that I think the more dialogue we have, the better to maybe coming up with a plan for the future. For me, if this is a dialogue that we have an opportunity to opt out if we're not satisfied with where it's going, I feel inclined to have the dialogue. I do see what you're saying in terms of the timing being pushed and not having a lot of information about other subregions or what we're really looking at here. I would want to make sure that we're not signing up for something we're stuck with and aren't going to like. But I seem to understand that there is a way to look at what it is after we have the discussions and opt out before we're locked into anything. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can't we have the discussion before we vote on it? I mean, it does seem.
I think there's a timing issue with what has to be submitted to the state.
There's a timing issue related to joining together with the other agencies. And so that's the timing issue now. It's whether we want to participate or not. And really the real unknown here is what is the allocation that would be prescribed to the city of St. Helena. If the allocation is 1 unit over 5 years, then there's a good argument not to spend the $10,000 and collaborate because we can achieve that. But if the number is very large and it may be something difficult for the city, then it raises the question of whether there's value in collaboration. So I think the challenge is partly because we don't have information. We did look at every other agency's staff report to build ours, and so this looks literally very similar to the other agencies that are confronting the same question. There was a conversation earlier about whether NVTA, for example, would take the lead on hiring a consultant, and there was a period of time where the county decided that that was of their interest, and so the city managers of the region participating in conversations didn't balk at the county's interest in leading that discussion, but that may be a material issue or consideration for you that the county, rather than NVTA, for example, is interested in leading that conversation.
I need to open it to public comment. So I'm going to open it for public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. Any further comment?
Well, I kind of agree with Paul that I'm not really sure what we're signing up for and what we're actually going to accomplish by December. I mean, it looks here like, are we actually going to see some numbers in May of what our 2023 number might be? And so if we want to get into this cooperative process, we have to roll the dice and sign up before the number comes in a couple of months. Am I understanding this correctly?
So we're anticipating ABAG releasing the draft sub-region share of the total housing need in May of 2020, and then assigning shares in July of 2020. And the statutory deadline for the sub-region that we would potentially join here would be to submit our draft methodology to the state in December. So there is about a 5-month window for discussions regionally on whether we stay with the sub-region or whether we go it alone and work with the numbers that are prescribed for us.
So we would have that option at that point. Once we saw those numbers, at that point we could disconnect from the sub-region.
Right. Or you disconnect now and we're on our own.
So to me, if there's nothing to lose by working on collaboration,
10,000 and staff time can we? There's no time. I understand the city of Calistoga is not participating in this. What about Yountville?
Yes, for now. I think their perspective is we're gonna talk, we're gonna evaluate, and then we'll make our own decision at some point whether we stay or we back out.
City of Napa?
They're participating.
And American Canyon?
Yes.
I guess my problem is I can't fathom what somebody is going to offer in terms of cooperation that is going to, be a huge benefit to us. I mean, we did get a county loan that was less than the money that we put into the Turley project, and we credited the county with 2 units. So there is some benefit in that it helped make the project feasible, but I'm not understanding what we're going to get here other than a shift of allocations, and what kind of agreement is there that the money will be forthcoming from the other parties or whatever to make it happen. I feel like I don't have enough information to commit and get into it.
And this is the last opportunity to do so?
We can call a special meeting and continue to talk.
When is the cutoff date, deadline date? Oh, so it's right around that corner. Yeah, okay. So it's okay. Well, so I'm not seeing
group moving towards this. So if I look at the discussing joining designate 2 city council representatives. So there's no support here, I'm saying.
Not for me. Right?
Okay. Well, I personally would be in support of it, but I'm not seeing the consensus of the council, so I think the direction is that we're not going to do that.
That's okay.
Okay.
We'll communicate that.
Okay. Thank you. And so we'll move now to 11.4, which is discussion and consideration of city position on Napa County Measure K, and this is Priya Nixon.
Good evening. I will be very brief in my presentation. What you have before you is some information on Measure K, and Measure K proposes a 0.25% special tax for 15 years. This revenue will be used to enhance open space restoration throughout the county. And what we're looking for from the council is to consider a position of support, opposed, neutral, or no position for this. And with that, I will hand it over to you for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any initial questions from the council? Okay, I'm going to open public comment if there's...
Great, thanks. Thank you. I am wearing 2 hats today. Chuck McMahon. The usual hat is the Vine Trail Chair and President, but I'm also on the Yes on Measure K committee and the signer of the arguments against or in rebuttal to the opposers of Measure K. And first I want to thank several members of the council, actually all but Councilwoman Koberstein have already endorsed this individually, which we thank you very much for, and Councilmember Koberstein asked that we put this on the agenda tonight so that we could hear it in public and those watching could hear it, the pros and cons of Measure K. I guess I'll be brief since many of you know what Measure K is, but Measure K is to provide a permanent funding source to allow the Regional Parks and Open Space District to acquire and protect additional land in Napa County, to maintain that land, and I think what's especially appropriate or interesting to the city of St. Helena is to provide a share of 20% of the funding back to the city of St. Helena, which your staff has determined is about $110,000 a year, to maintain local parks that are in your approved park and rec plan. Some of you may recall that a predecessor measure was tried several years ago, Measure Z. It failed by less than a point in getting, or 2 points in getting to 66 2/3 vote. I think several things have changed since that point, and some of them involve just our awareness in the community. Some of them involve the measure itself. In terms of what's changed in the measure, the inclusion of the 20% that comes back to the local districts or the local cities, including St. Helena, is new. What's changed in the community, I think, is an increased awareness of the need to protect open space. An increase in awareness of the need to protect the waters, the lands that have water that runs off into our reservoir, which is a high priority of the acquisitions being proposed by Measure K. And the third was the importance of fire management, and what's included in the 25% of the funds that go toward maintenance includes maintenance that would include fire protection. The current estimate on the budget is over $500,000 a year that could be used to reduce the potential for fire on the lands that are protected. So far, the Regional Parks and Open Space has done a spectacular job, I think, with a very limited budget that comes at the discretion of the County of Napa. There are many other conflicting needs for those discretionary funds, and so a permanent funding source will help to protect probably an additional 20,000 acres of land in Napa County over the 15-year duration of the tax. And the tax is a 1% tax that would be applied, generating about $9 million a year to be used for this purpose. The other thing I'll say is that because it is a sales tax, our tourist visitors will pay about 1/3 of the cost of Measure K. So I think for all those reasons, it's really a valuable thing for the council as a whole, for the city of St. Helena as a whole to endorse and join more than 35 organizations that have supported it, including the Vine Trail Coalition and the Napa Valley Vintners and Vision 2050. If you can get both of those to agree on a proposition, you got to be doing something right. Over 25 elected officials, including all the Board of Supervisors, Senator Dodd, Assemblywoman Curry, Mike Thompson. There really is no organized opposition to this except for the people who always object to any sort of attacks under any condition. So we encourage you to vote for it. And Councilwoman Koberstein, we'd love to have your individual endorsement as well, if appropriate. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to defend myself here for a second. I received a telephone call.
Motion to extend.
We need
Then
a
you have all the time you can get.
unanimous motion to go beyond
we need to
9:30.
extend for like
More public comment also.
Yes, so we need to make a motion and we'll bring up more public comment.
extend
We'll
for
give you a
another
chance.
15 minutes.
Yeah, we'll do it quick, I think. So do we have a motion?
Second.
Okay.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Additional public comment, and then we'll let you defend.
That's okay.
Twice.
Good evening, Chair Ellsworth and council members. Chuck and Tasha and I have been here for most of the meeting, so thank you for giving us the chance to speak tonight. I think Chuck summarized all the major points of Measure K, and I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts in support. As you know, Measure K presents an opportunity for Napa County to take action to protect its water, parks, and open space. I saw that Jack Stewart had sent a letter to the council that sets out the issues quite well. And I think, as Chuck mentioned, the measure will provide funding for ongoing management of land, including fuel load reductions, which means, again, that Measure K will help to reduce wildfire risk. And as we know, the natural and agricultural beauty of our county is one of the major reasons visitors come here. And under Measure K, visitors in Napa County will also be contributing to help protect these natural resources. And I think the other thing is in the context of the city, sitting through the presentation about paying for the sidewalks, is the fact that Measure K would provide funding for the city to take care of some of its parks and open space projects that it wants to do within the city. And as Chuck mentioned, that wasn't in the provision that of the measure when it came before voters a few years ago, and I think that means it's an improved measure here. So it's a small cost to ask our residents and visitors to pay, and protecting our natural resources like water, open space, forests, and wildlife habitats is definitely worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Dr. Tasha Commandant. I'm a native of St. Helena. I live now in Napa. I am a biologist. I work at a foundation called the Pepperwood Foundation over in Sonoma as the Conservation Science Manager. And I also serve on the Napa County Watershed Information and Conservation Council appointed by the supervisors. So I think my colleagues and others have summarized the benefits of this, but I just want to emphasize how important it is to protect this important place. We have incredible biodiversity. We're one of the global hotspots for plant diversity in the world. So we have multiple benefits that can come from this measure. I think it's very well thought out. It provides protection for watershed, open space access, and the agency, the Open Space Regional Parks District, has a very strong record, and I think it is worth investing in the leadership that they've provided. I work a lot over in Sonoma, and for 20 years they've had this kind of funding mechanism, and it's truly incredible what they've been able to do with this, and the level of collaboration, the science base that this has brought to their county to make decisions. They've protected hundreds of thousands of acres with this kind of funding mechanism. So I strongly encourage you to support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting.
Seeing no more public comment, I'll close the public comment. I'll bring it back up to the council. And Ms. Koberstein, I would like to.
Yeah, I would just like to say I got a call yesterday from a very good friend and supporter saying, "Whoa, why are you against Measure K?" And I said, "I'm not." What happened was about 6 weeks ago, maybe, I got a telephone call from somebody saying, "Would you endorse this?" And I said, "I think the better thing would be if you would bring it to the city council so the entire council would endorse it, that it would carry more weight." I didn't say I was opposed to it. And if people are taking it that way, put my name on it. I don't care. Well, you know, we did it with Measure C, and so it seemed to me to be appropriate to have the voice of the whole city behind it instead of us just signing on individually. But I'm happy to sign on individually.
Further comment?
Yeah, I have some quick thoughts. First of all, I love what the priorities are, and I just want to make a play. Well, let's just say what do I like? I like the fact that Bell Canyon Reservoir and preserving watersheds, that's extremely important. We're feeling development pressure from above that reservoir, and it's very concerning for me and for other members of the town about being able to make sure that that water stays safe. So that is huge. And also the increasing the open space district. They've done a wonderful job in the areas that they've been. And what I would love to see is, as part of this, to have some of the folks from Down Valley come to the council and talk about our watershed and talk about open space opportunities around St. Helena. We feel a little ignored often by Down Valley because we just are much less populated, and so all the action tends to happen down in Napa and American Canyon, and that's great, but I'd like to see also some effort here. And by the way, thank you guys for staying so late, because it's late and you guys lasted the whole meeting. Amazing.
Mr. Dorian, any thoughts?
I'm supportive for the reasons stated by all.
As am I. And so with that, we will look for a position of support. Looks like we've got consensus on that. Is there any more direction that you need? Do we need a motion? So I will entertain a motion. Would somebody like to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would move that we actually bring back a formal resolution, which I don't think is here tonight, expressing the full council support.
We would bring back at the next meeting a resolution based on a motion of support.
Very good.
But can they represent in their mailings that they have our support now? I mean, we're getting close to an election, right?
You can direct us in your motion to do that.
Sure.
And share that.
Okay, so in the motion is that you'll come back with the resolution, and that also our support will be publicly made public.
Yeah, I mean, they're authorized to publicize it before the next 2 weeks when we meet again.
Okay, is that substantial enough? Okay, so with that, if we feel we have what we need, yeah, we'll need a roll call. Sorry, thank you.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I did.
All right, so we need a second.
I second Mary Koberstein on this issue.
And we'll have a roll call, please.
Councilor Koberstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilor Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. With that, I will thank everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Jesse, for being here.
And Mayor, we'll continue the final item and bring that back to your next
great.
meeting.
Thank you. And that's so with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and we'll see everybody next time. Appreciate it.